Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Good evening to those on the East Coast.
Everyone.
Hope everyone slept well last night. I didn't. I don't know, man. With those meetings, it just kind of can't sleep.
I hear you. It's hard to come down from that. Yeah.
Agreed. Mayor Medina, Linda Mason, if she hasn't reached out, has a work event, and she might be able to attend this meeting, but it's unconfirmed.
Okay. No, I was not aware, but thank you for letting me know. Okay. If we're ready, why don't we go ahead and call the San Bruno City Council meeting of July the 13th, 2022 at 5 p.m. to order. May I please have a roll call?
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Here.
Councilmember Salazar?
Here.
Vice Mayor Mason is absent with notification. And Mayor Rico Medina?
Here. We'll move on to item 3, public comments for items not on the agenda. This is the opportunity for individuals to be allowed up to 3 minutes to comment on items that are not on the agenda for this evening. It is council's policy to refer matters raised in this forum for staff for investigation and or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from acting or discussing upon any item of matter not agendized pursuant to state law. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak on items not on the agenda?
No hands are raised.
Thank you very much. We'll move into item number 4, conduct of business.
Item 4A, adopt resolution approving fiscal year 2022-23 service level enhancements.
And then we'll turn it over to the city manager, please. And please note for the record, Vice Mayor Mason is present.
Good evening, Mayor Medina, members of the City Council, Javon Grogan, City Manager. I'm here along with the full complement of your department head team to discuss budget enhancements for the fiscal year 22-23 budget cycle. We have planned a presentation that will be shared locally at this time, but you will also have the presentation provided by myself, Finance Director Chin Yu Sun, as well as each department director that has a enhancement request will come on and provide a brief articulation of that enhancement request. It's been over a month since we met in our initial budget study sessions to go through the enhancement request. And so we thought it was best to do just a brief overview of each enhancement request. Toward the end of the presentation, you will note that we have combined the enhancement request into groups. First, beginning with the general fund, all one-time enhancement requests, all ongoing enhancement requests, and then finally all enhancement requests that are net neutral, being either offset by ongoing revenue or an accompanying expenditure reduction. And then we will discuss the enhancement requests related to the enterprise, or then the next group has enhancement requests related to the enterprise funds and enhancement requests related to the internal service funds. It's important to note that while we group the enhancements that way, if you'll recall from the staff report, some enhancement requests are in multiple departments. For example, there may be an enhancement request for a position that is split funded, some in enterprise, some in the general fund, et cetera. And so we will articulate that as we go through. So if we can share the PowerPoint presentation, we shall begin. All right, and we can, just in the interest of time, skip over. And the goal for tonight is for the City Council to discuss and provide direction on or approval of any enhancement requests that are acceptable to the Council. And so let's begin with the next slide. And then adopted budget highlights. I'll turn it over to our finance director, Ms. Chin-Yu Sun, to go through the beginning slides.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and then members of council. Thank you, City Manager. This is Chin-Yu Sun, the Finance Director. And I will spend the next few minutes to give you some review of the adopted highlights. It's been a few days since we talked about the budget, so the purpose for me to review the adopted highlights is just remind everybody how much money there is available in each fund. So this is actually adopted. So our 22-23 adopted budget stats is actually we have all fund budget about $261 million and $56 million in general fund budget. Total employee number is 262, and we have 93 capital improvement projects. And then general fund summary is for 22-23 we will begin the year, we actually begun the year as $7.6 million in fund balance. Total operating revenues is projected to be $54.8 million. Expenditures are going to be about $55.5, and then we will have a slight deficit of $634,000, and then the fund balance by the end of this current fiscal year is just around about $7 million. Here, general fund has some unrestricted reserve, and this is the estimate of the reserve for general fund at the end of the fiscal year 22-23. General fund contingency will have about $7 million. That's our fund balance we talked about. And then general fund also has a rainy day account called general fund reserve. It will have about $12 million, $12.3 million. General fund capital reserve will have about the $28 million, which is taking into consideration of the YouTube community benefit payments. And emergency disaster fund will have about $2.8 million, just behind the target $3 million. In total, the general fund unrestricted reserve at the end of the current fiscal year will be around $50 million. The net general fund reserve is taking consideration of any kind of a deficit from enterprise fund netted out of the general fund unrestricted reserve we talked about. The general fund with all the reserve accounts is forecast to hold about $50 million at the end of this fiscal year. However, we have some deficit from CityNet and stormwater, so the viable unrestricted reserve balance is actually just around $33.4 million. Measure G is another funding source. The voters approved in 2020. So in fiscal year 22-23, we will have about $3.2 million in fund balance to start, and then we will hopefully add to the fund by $3.7 million in revenue, and then council also approved a proposed use of $6.1 million. So this fund will end this fiscal year likely with a fund balance of $876,000. Enterprise fund, water fund will end the year with about $25 million balance, and wastewater is a little bit higher, $25.5. Stormwater and the CityNet services we talked about will be in the deficit status. Stormwater will be in 1.1 million deficit. CityNet will have a deficit of almost $15.5 million. Internal service fund will also have a balance of, we typically keep the internal service fund about 15 to 25 million, or 25% of annual budget expenditure. So this fund balance as of the 22-23, the target, we set all the fund balance at around the 15% of the budget expenditure as required by the reserve policy. So in total, the internal service fund will have a fund balance of 1.7 million at the end of the fiscal year. So that summarizes the adopted budget. I'll hand the presentation back to the city manager.
Thank you, Director Sun. Important to note that based on the City Council actions last night, there is an expected $900,000 in additional revenue to the general fund that is not allocated. And so that would increase those general fund balances at this time by approximately $900,000. And so the enhancement summary is shown on slide 13. And so there's a total net enhancement request of $2 million, ongoing for the general fund 1.9, one time of just over $869,000. Offsetting or new revenue of 1.775 with a net impact of $859,000 in the general fund. Internal service funds, as shown, $159,000 ongoing, $72,000 one time, a net cost of $231,000. Enterprise funds, a ongoing cost of just under $150,000, one-time cost of $375,000, and just under $925,000 of net new costs, with the total amount shown there. First enhancement request I will take as the city manager. And so as we discussed at the last time we talked about the budget, for the city manager's office, there is a recommendation to reconfigure positions that are within that office by adding a HR director position, eliminating or freezing the economic development manager position, and adding one-time funds. And so the summary here is there's a request to restore the HR director position that was a funded position, but was unfunded and transitioned eventually to a assistant city manager position that still primarily was a HR director, and so those assistant city manager services, the city did not receive the full complement. We've discussed before the complex nature of personnel administration for the city of San Bruno, as well as there was a memo attached to the budget staff report that went through in detail the level of our HR staffing compared to comparison organizations, and just at a high level, I think the data was clear that we are understaffed from an HR perspective, and cities of our size also have a assistant city manager to support corporate oversight of the organization. The recommendation for retaining the assistant city manager position, but having that position be solely focused on corporate management oversight would be as shown in the gray bullets on the screen, where that position would primarily be responsible for development services with direct reports of the public works director and the community and economic development director, and supporting not only those departments, but core oversight and management of significant economic development projects that we have still ongoing work to implement the Bay Hill specific plan. We still employ the services of a consultant to support the Bay Hill specific plan and their implementation. The council is aware of Craig Whittam, who supported us through adoption. He continues to support that project through its implementation, but those services would be shifted to the assistant city manager position, as well as corporate oversight of the Reimagining Tanfran project, supporting Amazon with their plans for reactivation of the Sky Park facility. That discussions are ongoing, and we expect an application soon, as well as longer-term major development projects, which is a town center, which we haven't really had the capacity to talk about, but is a significant economic development area for the city that requires vision, oversight, and direction as well. In addition, the project would be, or the position would be chiefly responsible for oversight and development of our economic development program. It would not be that boots on the ground manager of the economic development program, but they would be responsible for that program. And as a reminder to council, that program is not just focused on our large businesses or our major redevelopment areas. The programs will significantly be focused on our small and medium-sized businesses, both attraction and retention and growth of our commercial corridors with small businesses. That the position would also be responsible for special project management and citywide management support. And this initial recommendation called for eliminating or freezing that vacant economic development manager position that was that boots on the ground position to run the economic development program on a day-to-day basis. But instead utilize one-time funds for economic development support. We had significant discussions around this recommendation, and certainly council and staff's uncomfortableness with freezing that position. And so if we go to slide 15, I would like to proffer a alternative or a modification to this recommendation, and what that is we shift how we fund positions in the city manager's office and utilize the baseline general fund money to support the assistant city manager position and the HR director position, and retain the recommendation of restoring the HR director position. That is $262,000 a year fully loaded, and retain the assistant city manager position for all of those items that we talked about, but thirdly, retain the economic development manager position, but fund that with the newly anticipated general fund revenue from the Artichoke Joe's agreement. That would be $172,000 ongoing. Key point is that one key role of this position will be to focus on downtown, where we know and we heard from both businesses and residents that Artichoke Joe's has a significant impact on our downtown, as we know. But to fund this position with a portion of those, that $900,000 that is expected from Artichoke Joe's. And so that is a modification. The ongoing cost in this year's budget is $141,000. Ongoing, it would be an additional $90,000 to the general fund on an ongoing basis when you look at the delta of what would be needed. And then again, 172 would be picked up by, would be funded by the Artichoke Joe's funds. And so that is a modification recommendation, I think one being responsive to council's desires to retain the economic development manager position, but also being responsive to the organizational need for an HR director and assistant city manager. And so with that, we will go through to the next enhancement request, which is our finance department. And as I stated before, we will have the directors articulate and then have council questions as we go through the grouping of the enhancements. Director Sun?
Thank you, City Manager. Finance Department has about two general fund enhancement requests as listed here. The first item is we have a account customer service representative lead. That person retired in December, so we would like to delete that position and then add a budget officer position to the department. As we all know, the finance department is sorely short-staffed, and we definitely need to enhance our analytical strength. Currently, the budget work is shouldered by the revenue service manager, who is overly overstretched for the budget-related responsibilities. And then also, I'm hoping with the new budget officer, this person will have more budget development expertise to take the budget development for the city of San Bruno to the next level. Although I would say staff have done an excellent job developing budget, and we under the council and the city manager's guidance, but there is more to do, and then there is the process that has a lot to be improved. And hoping with the additional staff, we will be able to improve the process and then have our have the budget development take the budget development into the next level. With the swapping of positions, we're only going to add about $26,500 to the budget, and that's a net change. The other request, finance department is asking for adding a purchasing officer. So the city of San Bruno really need to have a fully need some improvement in our purchasing policies and procedures. I'm hoping with the extra strength in that area, we will be able to tackle that task and improving the city's policy and procedures of purchasing, and also taking off some of the PO and the vendor management from my current staff. Currently, the PO and the vendor management are taken care of by the accounting staff. I only have 2 accounting staff left over right now. They are certainly overwhelmed at this time as well. With more support on the purchasing end, I think the operation in finance will definitely have some improvement there. So the purchasing officer is budgeted for about 8 months. Ongoing, we will see this cost increase by a third. So this $108,000 is only for 8 months or so. With ongoing, so we're looking at this cost increase by about $34,000. Next will be the fire department.
Thank you, Ken. And as the fire chief comes, I'll just add to the budget officer position. Another benefit of that position is that it would actually vest significant knowledge of development of our budget with a staff level position. Kenya, I want to just thank you for all of the work you did to develop our budget, and both yourself as the finance director and the prior finance director really are the leaders of the budget development and hold much of the knowledge base in developing our budget. And so this shift of position will actually help with knowledge transfer and put that knowledge at a staff level.
Totally agree.
Chief Delay, you're not on mute, but we can't hear you.
How about now?
Perfect.
Great. Honorable Mayor, members of the council, Ari DeLay, your fire chief. Just wanted to take a few minutes to provide a brief overview of our request for a budget enhancement to support our training captain position in the joint training division that the San Bruno Fire Department participates in partnership with our Central County Fire Department partners in the South. To provide just a brief history, the San Bruno Fire Department has participated in this joint training division for approximately the last 10 years. This is really a collaborative effort that provides us significant cost savings while providing us a more robust cadre of instructors and a deeper bench to draw from to support training and education of our firefighters. And really the heart of the matter is today we're really at a crossroads with the training division. The volume and complexity of training that's required to operate a modern all-risk fire department in today's world has grown significantly, and the current model is insufficient to continue, and it lacks the adequate personnel really to deliver the required training for our folks. Our firefighters, captains, battalion chiefs, and fire prevention staff all have extensive training requirements to support their positions. Our firefighters don't only fight fires, but they provide emergency medical services at the EMT and paramedic level. They provide hazardous materials response, technical rescue, pre-fire planning, and a myriad other work products that the fire department delivers to our community. Our fire captains not only require all that training that I just described for our firefighters, but they also require to have a significant volume of supervisory training in addition to career development and other training requirements that we have for their position. We also have 4 battalion chiefs that require these same training requirements as in addition to command and control requirements to support their job functions. And finally, our fire prevention staff, I don't want to leave them out. They have a significant annual training requirements to support investigations and inspections that they do and plan reviews to provide the services that our fire prevention division provides every day to our community. And moving forward, we're requesting to add a fire captain position to the training division. This is really a change from our current practice. We have historically only contributed financially to the training division, and really the workload has increased significantly enough where they're really looking for a person from the city of San Bruno to help support the cause of training. This proposal really allows us a significant advantage, as it will have a member of the San Bruno Fire Department embedded in the training division that helps make sure that our interests are protected, as well as having the additional capacity to maintain the myriad of requirements that we're bound to every day, including OSHA, NFPA, ISO, and other industry standards and best practices for a modern all-risk fire department. And as a partner with San County Fire Department, we really have a responsibility to share the burden of providing the personnel and resources to provide this high level of training that's required of our employees. And in summary, we respectfully ask for your support and the budget enhancement request to add the fire captain to the training division to allow us to earlier and having that representation for the city of San Bruno in the training division, as well as having that capacity to maintain the myriad of requirements from, like I said, OSHA, NFPA, ISO, and those other industry standards. The cost is reflected in the slide you see before you right now, and I just want to say thank you for your consideration, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
We're going to continue through to the various departments, please.
No problem.
Okay, Parks, can I have Director Matola?
Good evening, council members. I'm very happy to be here this evening to talk about this staffing enhancement request that we have. That is a result of a Parks organizational assessment that was summarized in a memo that we sent to council on June 9th. So this is kind of a review of the top line justification for this enhancement. So this request isn't for any new positions, and it does not add to the FTE count. What we're proposing to do is to convert two existing positions to create better efficiencies within the current staffing level. So we're looking at converting two different park maintenance worker 1-2s. The first conversion is to a park maintenance worker lead, and this lead position will be responsible for infrastructure maintenance. This centralizes a function that is currently being performed by all of the parks team members as they come across various infrastructure issues during the day-to-day routine landscape maintenance that they perform in the parks. So rather than continuing the practice of disrupting the landscape maintenance functions to address infrastructure issues in a reactive manner, this new team will implement a structured maintenance plan for items such as irrigation, fencing, signage, play equipment, a lot of these park amenities. This will create an improved efficiency in the park landscape maintenance area. They can focus on that work without being disrupted, and will also create an improved proactive service delivery model in maintaining our aging infrastructure. I should also mention that kind of having this infrastructure crew, which is oftentimes called construction in other departments, is a best practice, and it's a way to really keep, look at all the different components of parks as a program and something that you actually program maintenance of on a very regular basis. So the second change is to convert one of the park maintenance workers to a community services technician. This position will be responsible for administration of our tree program and the SB response service requests, and will centralize a function that currently is distributed throughout the community services department. A piece of it is within parks, some of it's within administration. And so it really kind of puts it under one roof with an appropriate classification leading the charge. This classification, and there were some questions that came up with this in an earlier budget hearing. The classification is similar to the community development technician or the engineering technician, in that the classification provides administrative support to a technical process. It is not a field position. And this will also create efficiencies by freeing up time of the park field supervisor, allowing them to have time for better oversight of and participation in field ops. I also wanted to make mention, I think this is really important to note, that this is not a final solution to address all of the deficiencies that we have within the park maintenance function. This is an incremental measure to create the most efficient staffing model with the FTEs that we do have. And once we fill these positions, we'll conduct further review to bring forward potential solutions to further address the media maintenance function. So that's all I have on this. And again, I will be here at the end of this to answer any questions that you have.
Community and Economic Development Director, Pamela.
Thank you, City Manager Grogan. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. Pamela Wu with Community and Economic Development Director. So we have several building budget enhancements, two from Building Division. The first one you're seeing on the screen is a consultancy for in-house plan checker to provide a over-the-counter plan review services. Currently, the Building Division offers up to 3 hours per week for someone to come in to get a re-roof permit, a simple water heater permit. We're proposing to up that limit to provide up to 24 hours a week. With that said, that will amount to a total of $141,960. And again, I want to emphasize that this is only services to be paid if it's rendered. We do ask Council to allow for this budget enhancement should there's a need from the community to exercise this additional service. The second one is to allow the continuation of a building inspector that has been working with YouTube and also the Hvac project to continue having 4 days in the City Hall to do building inspection. The Community and Economic Development Department has recently gone through some staffing changes. My current 2 building inspectors are young in their career where they don't have the expert knowledge to perform large commercial projects such as the YouTube projects that you're seeing every day behind Bay Hill Shopping Center. We're relying on a more seasoned building inspector from a consulting firm to provide that services. And we're also asking Council to allow for a budget enhancement up to $250,000. We do see that the uphill project wrapping up, where the phase 1 project approaching, so there's going to be increased amount of inspection requests in addition to the fast coming Hvac construction coming to a head. So we're hoping for a larger amount from the previous proposal, and I do want to remind you that Council actually approved the same amount in January as another budget enhancement for this item. Can I have the next slide? So there are 3 budget enhancements from the Planning Division. The very first one is to start our general plan amendment. Council remembers that our last general plan was adopted in 2009. By state law, they're outdated, and we do need to start looking at the ways and also possibility of staffing resources or consultancies to get this work underway. We're asking for $100,000, and that is not going to come from general fund. That will be coming from general fund maintenance fund that's been set aside from every building permit that's issued with the city to start looking for a consultant and looking for ways to figure it out. This is going to be a multi-year effort to get the city's general plan up to date. The second request from the Planning Division is kind of like the first one, but a little bit more urgent. So the state has provided new mandates to have a safety element, which is part of the general plan. We don't have a safety element in our general plan right now. The state has legal restriction asking each city to have their own safety element in place within a certain amount of time. We're actually collaborating with 21 elements to do a regional effort, but the estimated amount is about $70,000. Again, this money will not be coming from the general fund, and it will be coming from the general plan maintenance fund that's being taken from each building permit. The third ask from the Planning Division is about $120,000 to complete the CEQA work as part of the housing element. As you remember, the draft housing element was presented to Council and now available for the community to review for feedback, and we have just sent the draft to HCD for their comments. Another critical component of the housing element is to do adequate CEQA analysis. We have originally approached the CEQA consultant, David J. Powers, to start the work. We did not realize that it needed an additional amount. So we're coming to council for additional amount that will cover all of the required studies to complete the CEQA analysis so that we can have a compliant and also a satisfying housing element by the due date of next January. So there will be 5 total of budget enhancements from CED. Let me know if you have any questions.
You're on mute, City Manager.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Wu. We'll now turn to Chief Ryan Johansson.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Ryan Johansson, your Chief of Police, and thank you for giving me a few moments to speak about the enhancement request of the police department for this budget year. The first has been talked about a great deal, but it is to unfreeze one of the 2 remaining frozen police officer positions. I think that, as has been previously discussed, the interest in doing this is not only to enhance the level of public safety service that the police department is able to provide to the community, resulting in reduced response times and increased quality of service, but also to improve the quality of life for the men and women who work at the San Bruno Police Department, who have been under a staffing crunch for quite some time. They're required to work a tremendous amount of overtime in order to make minimum staffing levels. So the request to add this position is to help sort of bleed that valve a little bit and to get us moving in the right direction. The second item here is titled ADA Translation. This is actually to comply with the legal requirement that the police department is currently unable to comply with, and that we need to be able to communicate with a variety of different members of the public when they're attempting to report something to the police department. The cost here is to provide a series of tablets at the front counter and in dispatch that are equipped with translation software that is now capable of providing translation for a variety of different languages in the event that we do not have actual physical person present that can provide those translation services. So this is simply in an effort to gain that level of compliance. Bicycle patrol with a one-time cost of $5,500. This is simply really due to a bit of an oversight of us, and from a budget standpoint over the years, as you know, we have police patrol bicycles that are utilized for a variety of special events and patrol activities in the city. These were paid for a number of years ago through a combination of grant funding and some budgetary allowances. But we never accounted for the need to maintain those bicycles, to replace them as they go down, and to replace parts that inevitably wear over time. And so we're attempting to create a budgetary line item so that we can maintain the bicycles and ensure that they continue to be available for use in our community. Next slide, please. The Hvac automated SMS system or text messaging system is next, here with an ongoing cost of $3,500. As I have reported back in the annual report and a couple other times, one of the chief complaints of community members that are pleased with police service, but nonetheless, we ask for how we can better serve, is the lack of follow-up after you file a police report. I think all too often people file a police report because, for example, their car was broken into and they really don't hear anything back from the police department from that point forward. And while there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes in an effort to solve those crimes and to get property returned in the case of a burglary, we don't report on those things back to the public. And to be quite frank, we don't have the staffing bandwidth to do so on a proactive basis. The Hvac automated SMS system is a system that integrates with our CAD RMS, or the system we use for logging and dispatching calls throughout the day. And it allows us to set up a series of text messages that can get sent out with permission of the resident or the community member at different intervals to give them updates as to what's happening with their particular case. We can also use the system to send out automated text surveys. And we can vary those surveys based on the reason that someone interacted with the police. So, for example, a victim of a burglary might get a different survey than, say, a witness to a crime. But nonetheless, this allows us to scale up, increase our survey efforts to get feedback from the community, and also provide this all-valuable feedback at really a relatively low cost. The next item is a key control system with an ongoing cost of $1,200 annually and a one-time cost of $5,000. As you can imagine, the police department maintains hundreds of keys to access all kinds of different buildings, gates, vehicles throughout the city and within its own department in order to provide adequate public safety services. The problem is that as those keys get checked out or utilized, they often have a way of not returning, which obviously can create a number of different issues. Not only the fact that we no longer have that key, but the fact that it can create security issues in the community that those keys may not any longer be here at the police department. So this is to pay for a key control system that will categorize and log all of those keys into a secure box that requires an employee to scan their card and check out a given key. That is all then tracked so that we know where a key is at any given time, and we can track it back down if it disappears. We also know who the last person was to check it out. It'll also flag the officer individually if they've checked out a key and not returned it within a certain time frame. Second to last year is a team building workshop. So California Peace Officer Standards of Training is a governing body for almost all required training for police officers in the state of California. And POST has various recommendations for training and programs that they put on. One of them is the team building workshop, which POST recommends that any police department that undergoes the assignment of a new chief or other significant transition in key positions conducts within 1 year of making those changes. They believe this is so important that they, in fact, reimburse almost all of the costs of conducting a team building workshop. Obviously, it's been over 2 years since I was sworn in as the chief here in San Bruno, and that timeline has also included a complete replacement of all command staff positions. And so definitely in keeping with those recommendations, we should be conducting and engaging a team building workshop. We have gotten approval from POST to do so, so they will reimburse. We estimate about a $12,600 cost, with about $11,000 of that being reimbursed by POST, which is why you see the revenue increase for a net impact of about $1,600 in this project. And finally, last but most definitely not least, it's certainly in my mind as the executive here, is our wellness program. Wellness has not only been a past strategic initiative of the City Council, but has obviously been highlighted a great deal over the last couple of years, populated along with calls for police reform as to an essential component of improvement for police. This was part of the recommendation that emerged from the President's 21st Century Task Force on Policing. This has also been well documented by Cal Chiefs. In a recent survey, they noted that police suicides are at an all-time high, with 1 in 12 police officers in the United States contemplating suicide at any given time. This is why here in San Bruno we have been so fixated on the wellness of our staff and helping them to manage the inevitable traumas and difficulties of a career in law enforcement. The $50,000 of one-time money requested here will go to provide anonymous counseling services, mental health care for police officers. It will go to provide personal fitness training capabilities, people to come in and design workout and health programs for police officers, as well as a program to come in and design diet and nutrition programs and weight loss programs for officers in need there. I do suspect there will be some additional funding available here for us to queue up some other efforts in the wellness space that you've heard me talk about before. But I think that this is exceedingly important to continue providing the level of service we do to the community while also taking care of our folks. So I will let the other directors be available for questions at the end. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chief Johansson. I'll just expand upon wellness on one note, is that it is a one-time cost as enhancement request. It's sort of hard to call it a pilot because everything Johansson has done, he's sort of developed the program without really having program funding. And so this first year's allocation is a initial allocation, but do expect that should some of those efforts be developed, achieve success, there will be additional ongoing costs in the future. Just wanted to note that. Okay. Public Works Director, Director Matt Lee.
Good evening, Mayor Medina and members of council. Thank you for your time to allow me to discuss the enhancement request that we currently have for our budget in Public Works. Most of these enhancement requests alone in the general fund department aren't necessarily enhancement requests, but they're actually needs that department will need in order to continue the work that is set in front of us. A majority of these items, majority of these enhancement requests as well for positions are actually funded by other funds outside of the general fund, but I think they're just categorized in this category because it needs to have a specific home. The first position we are talking about is the reclassification of an associate civil engineer position to a senior civil engineer position. Public Works currently has a vacant associate civil engineer position that focuses on traffic engineering and managing the Traffic Safety Parking Committee, and the Traffic Safety Parking Committee related work. Recruitment for a qualified candidate has been an ongoing challenge since April 2020, and the city has been unsuccessful in filling the position. Staff recommends that we reclassify this position to a senior civil engineer position, similar to what the city of Burlingame has done in order to fill their position. In terms of the evaluation of the position itself, it does warrant a senior civil position level work in order for them to manage the TSPC and its efforts. Currently, the city is using a consultant to complete the TSPC and traffic engineering related staff. The administrative functions are being absorbed by the remaining staff that are currently still available, and that's taking away their time to focus on capital improvement projects and such. And so that would be the reason for the reclassification of the associate civil engineer position to senior civil engineer for the traffic engineering position. And so the ongoing cost would be just the delta between what an associate engineer would be versus what a senior civil engineer would be. The next position is the principal engineer position. This position is to be brought on so that they can be dedicated to managing the Tanfran redevelopment project efforts. And this is one of the lessons learned that's come through Bay Hill in terms of the size and volume of the project and the pace at which the development is anticipating to incur. The department would request that we add one additional principal engineer that would be funded by the development in order to keep up with the pace of the work so we can move the development through that process. Another senior engineer position, this one is solely focused on the capital improvement project. As we've discussed many times before with council, that there are a series of projects that are currently on hold. Providing a senior civil engineer to help with addressing some of the projects that are on hold would be significant. A senior engineer is being recommended in addition to the one associate level engineer because through the job classifications, associate engineers aren't allowed to supervise staff. And so because of the nature and the volume of projects we have, we do need a supervisory level to help coordinate the various projects and to provide training and guidance for the work. Next slide, please. And so as you can see, the associate civil engineer is there. So this position, as we done our analysis in the past, there would, the analysis actually shows that we need additional engineers, but staff really took a look to see what they could try to bring on board this year, and we felt that with the onboarding of one or two additional engineers on the CP side would help the backlog immensely. Furthermore, the senior civil engineer position is one that was recently just added to the classification series, and those positions are needed in order for us to begin a recruitment. The next, and those two positions are actually funded by capital improvement projects, which don't come through the general fund specifically, but are backfilled through that. The citywide traffic study is one that it's gone through kind of the timeline of when it was required. It's been renewed a few times, and there are additional streets that we are requesting to be looked at as part of the traffic study, and so that is going to be a one-time cost for us to do the traffic study that will allow us to continue our enforcement on our streets. The temporary engineering assistance is also a one-time cost given the recent departures of a variety of engineers about a month and a half ago. We are struggling with COVID and the vacancy rates to keep the counter open, and so the hope is that we provide some temporary engineering assistance that can help us process over-the-counter permits and keep the hours that we currently have available. The next item I will discuss in a variety of other funds. This management analyst position, I'll just state here, a portion of it is coming out of the Public Works Streets Division because we're ensuring that it's funded through every division in the Public Works Operation and Maintenance divisions. Next slide, please. So thank you, Director Lee. This is a summary of the one-time general fund enhancements. We'll come back to this. We'll keep going through the individual department presentations. So let's go to slide 24, which is back to Director Lee for water. But Director Lee,
really, before you begin to talk about water, just one note that I want to mention about the engineering positions. I know for one of those engineering positions, we are currently using a contractor. The hourly rate for that contractor, a senior level contractor, is $250 an hour. If we were to utilize that contractor, which we're not because we can't afford it, but at a full-time capacity, it would be more than double the cost of a staff level engineer. And so when we don't have the position and we have to rely on contractors, the cost is very significant.
Thank you. Thank you, City Manager Grogan. And that's a great point. And I think on the corollary, because the cost is that significant, if we were to use salary savings to pay for that traffic engineer, we can only have them part-time. And so I think that kind of adds to kind of the struggle and the backlogs of the need for other current engineering staff to support the TSPC and a variety of other traffic and transportation related work.
Right. And we've done that this year. We've had to ask for additional allocations because we've exhausted all the salary savings for that traffic engineer, but the consulting cost is so much higher. Continue.
Thank you. So on to the enterprise funds. These enterprise funds for water for water and wastewater are funds that we're going to talk about two specific positions that are needed to help support operations and other costs that kind of primarily involve just inflation and the cost of doing business for materials and other items. The first position is the management analyst position, which we kind of briefly touched on initially at the general funds discussion, but I'll go into a little detail here. This position will have a working title of actually a business application support analyst, but will be hired under the job description of a management analyst too. The analyst position will be established to address many of the recommendations from the City of San Bruno Public Works Department's organizational assessment prepared by Municipal Resource Group. This position will focus mainly on application enhancements that will coordinate the department's implementation of the GIS, CMMS, asset management across all operational divisions, to schedule and track work, manage assets, and eliminate the duplicative manual scheduling and tracking of the systems. Furthermore, this position will also focus on supporting the engineering section's effort to identify and implement a project's management software and develop procedures and processes related to the project management. This position will also support the My Government Online permitting system implementation effort from the Public Works end to reduce double entry and manual tracking of permits. From the business perspective, this position will also help create and streamline business workflows that are needed to automate processes with the applications described above. The key value of this business analyst is to analyze the workflow and design business processes and workflow strategies that can utilize software applications to access, retrieve, define data, rules and relationships, and methods of quality control of a database to leverage all software applications to help report and provide insight into metrics of the department. Currently, there is not a function like this within the department or within the city. Another recommendation achieved is to evaluate the city's contract with Links Technology, and this position will do that review to ensure that all necessary GIS-related services are provided and that all necessary or desired system features are functional. The position will help satisfy a staffing recommendation to consider creating a position dedicated to asset management so as to ensure that the data over time with the advent of new systems and equipment have the level of reliability that is needed. The application efforts that the business analysts will work on should help provide data needed to achieve the department's organizational and operational effectiveness goals as recommended by setting the foundation to establish performance and workload metrics for the department, identify and track timelines for response to common service requests, appropriately resource staffing levels to deliver capital improvement projects, aid in developing a more structured approach to identifying prioritization and performing street maintenance activities in the streets and stormwater divisions, such as contracting out easily measured, verifiable work in the streets division. This position will coordinate with input from maintenance of all vital infrastructure inventories and update them as crews make repairs and capital improvements are completed. This management analyst position itself, you'll see as we go through, will have ongoing requests through certain enterprise funds because we're trying to fund the position from the division that require the work. The next position is a capital project accountant. This capital project accountant will help the department and reside in finance to help with the accounting needs for capital improvement projects, as the Director Sun has discussed previously. For the remaining components of the water funds, overtime request, a one-time request is requested to help install remaining commercial meters for after hours, doing that during after hours work, and any delay to that will extend the installation of the meter schedules. The other items, the well treatment, water quality testing for wells, pipes and fittings, and replacement parts, treatment of testing supplies and tanks, are all due to price increases for materials and to ensure that we can run all wells again at full capacity based on the GSR, which is currently required by our Tier 2 conservation. If we are unable to run wells at full capacity, we'll fail to meet the SFPUC and BASCA distribution requirements for the drought due to lack of water production through the wells. Next slide, please. The same goes for the water quality treatment, feed pumps, chlorine analyzer, and supplies. The next item is the radio tower base station and water meter technology maintenance and monitoring. This ongoing $10,000 cost is requested to ensure that towers are maintained and the technology is up to date, enabling staff to effectively and efficiently acquire water meter data. If we are unable to fund this component, it will require staff to have to manually go out to remote sites in order to collect the data. And failure to do this can disable the ability to remotely access the data and deny data transmission to the customer portal, where residents are able to look at their water usage. The next item is the annual water supply and demand assessment and shortage report. This is a new state requirement, and so we need the funds to help us prepare the report. If this is not funded, we'll just fail to meet the state requirements, and there may be potential penalties that are currently unknown. For this item, the hatch water quality testing supplies. Next slide, please. The hatch, the RCS units, and the 16-inch ductile iron chainsaw, along with the emergency lights, are all one-time requests for items for use. The hatch system, as described, is also something that is part of the water treatment for the tanks, and that is needed in order to meet the agreements with SFPUC and BASCA to deliver water, clean and safe drinking water to the residents of San Bruno. The 16-inch ductile iron chainsaw is currently a device that staff does not have. At current water breaks, they're using a circular saw with a high RPM, and you'll have to cut that saw. You have to use that saw to cut the pipe 3 to 4 times. The chainsaw itself can cut through the pipe and is actually strapped to the pipe, which will actually make it safer for staff as they're out in water main breaks at night. The same thing with the emergency overhead lights. The scene lights that we have now are battery operated lights and last only a few years after consistent use. These lights on on a full charge may get us 2 hours of good light on top of the immediate work area. The new lights that we are requesting is a light mount that mounts to the truck and lights up the entire scene. This will allow for adequate light for us to light the entire area and not just the hole that we're working in, and make the scene much safer. We purchased these items over the last 2 years, and we would like to get one more to replace the battery lights, which are currently deteriorating in terms of the runtime. So moving on, next one is the wastewater enhancements. The wastewater enhancements, as we discussed previously with the water, is the same thing for the management analyst, which is the business application analyst, and the capital project accountant. The wastewater enhancements, the first one is the wastewater master plan update. This is an update of a 10-year plan and is a one-time cost. I believe the last time this was completed was 2012. The CIP planning won't reflect current conditions if we don't update the master plan, which will allow us to understand what our new priorities may be within the system. The sanitary sewer management plan update is also a one-time cost because it is a state requirement and there is a 5-year update period. If we do not proceed with this update plan, it would make us non-compliant with the state. Next slide, please. This spare pump at Lomita pump station is a one-time request because Lomita pump station does not currently have a spare pump. All the other stations do have a spare pump in case of an emergency usage, and so staff would like to request that we have one there just to make sure that Lomita pump station is operational if a spare pump is needed. The replacement of a tractor and wheel kit for sewer pipe video inspection. This is also a one-time request. One of the current tractor is nearing its 8 years of use and is being used even more now because the storm division are trying to utilize it to evaluate the conditions of sewer pipes and to set a process to do that. If this unit breaks, there would not be another unit that we can use for either stormwater or wastewater. And that because of the 8 years, the useful life is coming close to an end. The next fund would be stormwater. The management analyst highlighted there is also is the business analyst, application analyst position that we discussed earlier. So it would be a portion of that work. The one item, the stormwater contract spot repair. I think there's a typo here. This is actually $100,000 as a one-time cost. Correct. And so this additional $100,000 is not necessarily an enhancement, but a restoration of funds that were previously removed from the stormwater repair contract. This allows for potentially an additional 2 to 3 additional repair locations of storm breaks around the city. This is definitely hard to gauge, as council may be aware. In the past fiscal year, we have gone to council on one or more occasions requesting additional funds to repair failed storm drains or positions of areas of failed storm drain and sinkholes. Not filling this position will just put the city at risk to not be able to make immediate repairs to failed storm drain pipes, and they cause additional liabilities to the city. The next slide, please. The sidewalk pressure washing service, I think there was a request to increase from bi-monthly to monthly cleaning, and so this ongoing cost is a request for that. If this is not funded, the contract will bring the cleaning back to a bi-monthly period. I believe that's it for the enterprise funds. Next, we move on to the internal service funds. And as we mentioned in the management analyst position, which is 5% here, that actually is the business application analyst position that we talked about previously. The first one is the fleet study. The fleet study is part of our strategic initiative or council, city initiative to perform a fleet study to help us identify best practices, review staffing and resource levels, to review the funding allocation of vehicles, and identify cost efficiencies with our fleet, and then to review our replacement cycle. Staff has already put out an RFP and received proposals. I'm in the process of reviewing those proposals. If this request is not funded, staff will not proceed with the fleet study, and we will not fulfill this city council initiative. The next item is the contract repair for diesel and specialty city vehicles and equipment. There has just been a repair cost increase due to inflations, and so this request is reflective of that. If we do not fund this, it will keep certain vehicles out of service longer or reduce other types of service and repairs. Next, we move on to building and facilities. The same thing with the management analyst position, which is the business application analyst. It's partially funded out of ISF funds. One of the enhancements, the next enhancement is the San Mateo Avenue Decorative Streetlighting maintenance. This funding is required to help with the service interruptions to the lighting system. If this is not potentially funded, there could be increased risk of service interruptions to the lights in those areas on San Mateo Avenue. The next one is the Backflow testing and certification. Currently, there's been a fee increase due to inflation for the Backflow testing and certification for all the city Backflow devices, and so this is reflective of that. If we do not fund this, we will be out of compliance with regulatory requirements. Next slide, please. Next one is generator maintenance contract. This is an ongoing request for additional generator costs to maintain and ensure that all necessary generators are operating efficiently. If this is not funded, I think the overall preventive maintenance and inspections would reduce, and that may cause the generator to not operate for specific facilities when we need them. Next one is the HVAC contract maintenance. Costs again have gone up with our HVAC vendor, and this is reflective of that. If this is not provided, there will just be a reduce in HVAC repair services. The next item is roof maintenance. There's currently a new roof on-call contract, and the facility roofs in the past were not regularly assessed and repaired. And so just based through the inspections and investigations of roofs, increased repair is needed. Increased future costs. If this is not funded, there may more likely be increased future costs with roof maintenance, as if the problems are not addressed in a timely manner, they can create a larger situation on hand. The goal with these funds is staff are trying to extend the roof life and delay costly replacements. And that represents all the internal service fund enhancements for public works. I will pass this item next to Sandeep, our director for CityNet services.
Good evening, Honorable Council. Sandeep Krishnamurthy, Director, CityNet and IT. A few enhancements for presentation today. These are mostly follow-ons from the CIPs that were already approved by the Council, and these are for maintenance of the phone system, which is currently being replaced, the city website, which has been replaced, the SMS communication system, which will enhance the capabilities for us to send messages out from the city and through the website. imaging of the computers that are acquired by IT for tech refresh as part of the approved IT budget, as well as enhancements to the Citrix Cloud Navigator. Could we go to the next slide, please? And finally, there is the replacement of 2 switches planned to be kept in-house in case there is a failure of a switch anywhere in our system. That brings me to the end of the IT enhancement section. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Director Krishnamurthy. Okay, City Council, that takes us to the conclusion of the presentation of the enhancements. We are now ready to have City Council questions, and of course we should take public comment.
Thank you very much to all this, the senior leadership team for being here and making the presentation. A couple things I just want to start off with, and I'll certainly go to my colleagues, is first want to make it understandable that we had a prior meeting. We had about 3 minutes to spare before we went to our next regular city council meeting at 7 p.m. when we were dealing with the budget and trying to pass. So I know it's important. I'm going to say for me, and I believe the council, just to make sure that we're doing the due diligence, we're getting the good information, we have available time and opportunity to ask the questions that are important to us, and approve the enhancements. This is something that has happened before where we couldn't get through them all, and then they came back. So I just wanted that to be noted to the team so that they're clearly aware. I'm just going to give an overall assessment and just kind of in a general thing on general funds is, there's a lot of reclassifications, there's new positions, there's a suggestion for spending out of the approved last night Artichoke Joe's fund, and I will tell you, because I was going through these to see how to come up with some monies if one thing was done or not another, or however it worked out. This is something that I have done before, so this is not new. Maybe new to some of my colleagues here or some of the staff. But I believe, in my mind, I know we have one position in the police department to unfreeze at $118,826. I want to see, and I'm going to be looking toward unfreezing that second position at $118,826. So I'm looking for trying to get 2 of the positions. And again, it's unfrozen, meaning they're not new. Not a reclassification. It is just getting that. And I think it is the right thing to do at the right time, based especially with all of the information that we receive about the data and the rest of the comparison and the county and the staffing component and levels and the amount of overtime and requirements that it is to meet the minimum staffing. So I just want to put that out there, because some of my suggestions will be to make modifications in order to ensure we can try to fund, that's going to be my ask, the second frozen police officer position. And if there's other avenues to think outside the box, that's great. But I just want to give that forward to the council. And with that, as the city manager said, the team is available to answer questions. And then once we get questions, maybe I'd like to go to the public, and then we'll bring it back. So with that, colleagues, please. Councilmember Medina.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank all the staff for continuing to work towards this budget. Yes, we ran out of time last time. So my question, and I had a couple of them at first, and it was part of it with the Artichoke Joe's agreement that money isn't seen in the presentation. However, we're aware that there's this $900,000 that increase in revenue for the year. The other question about revenue for me is last night also we I believe we were told that potentially there's another $500,000 in this fiscal year in revenue from the Hyundai dealership. Just wanted to see if I heard that properly.
Yes. The additional $500,000 for the temporary operations of the Cardinale dealership was already included in the baseline budget.
Okay, so it was included in the budget. All right, thank you very much. Since the mayor did start the discussion of ask, I was going to hold off and kind of go through the questions here, but if there was a way to, and that's what we're here for tonight, to find out how to add another police officer, I'm interested in that discussion. I understand from the presentation from our chief of police that how understaffed we are and how stressed our department is. So I'll stop for now. And I guess at some point, Mr. Mayor, we'll go through a process. I think it worked pretty well in the past that we kind of start somewhere through the presentation or through the staff report and kind of go through those things that each of the council members are in favor of or have questions on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I did have a few questions on the items that we just went through, and I also want to thank staff. I know that we're dragging you through this several times, and a lot of times you're repeating what you already told us, and I want to acknowledge that you've all made very compelling cases for your needs, and it's certainly hard to say no to any of these because I understand very much the need for doing all these things, for all of the enhancements, all of the changes. But I'm coming at this from a standpoint of understanding that we're going into a period of an economic slowdown. So we can anticipate that the economy is not going to get better in the coming year, and we should anticipate that even some of our planned revenues may not be what we planned. And in addition to that, we started our baseline budget with a deficit of $600,000 roughly. So that was just where we started, right? We had to pull money from the fund balance just to make the baseline budget. So with that understanding, I'm coming into this definitely trying to scrutinize a little bit more about what expenses are actually absolutely necessary versus which may be potentially offset. So I just wanted to put that out there up front, and I did have some specific questions on some of the items that we covered. Going back to slide 16, for the contract on-demand senior building inspector, it shows a cost of $250,000 offset by, and I believe that would be offset by money that's coming from the foundation for the RAC. Is that correct? That's coming from that project funding?
Yeah. Councilmember Salazar, that $250,000 for the on-demand building inspector would come from the RAC as well as the YouTube project. So there's another item on tonight's agenda to continue with inspection services. So as noted by the director, the inspection services for both the RAC and the YouTube projects are currently being provided by a senior contract inspector, and in order to continue those services, we are nearly exhausted the funds that we have now. We need to extend that contract.
And so the impact to the RAC's budget, so if some of it will be offset there, are these funds already allocated in the RAC budget? So there's no delta to that project.
Right. Both projects are paying for building inspection fees. The RAC's budget, those costs are built in, and of course, YouTube is paying for building inspection fees. This contract is coming to the city council because the project pay the fees to the general fund, and the general fund provides the building inspection services. So it's actually distinctly different from the reimbursable contracts that we normally think of with development projects, where the planning review or the building permit review is done by a outside consultant, and that's a fully reimbursable. These funds are typical building inspection services that run through the general fund, where there's a fee paid and then an expenditure by the general fund. hence the need for the contract approval.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And next question is on the next slide, where the consultants for planning, those fees would be offset by I guess there's a fund somewhere of permit fees that were held and will be used to cover this, or are we talking about future permit fees to offset this?
No, there's a fund. Director Wu, will you articulate?
Sure. Councilmember Salazar, so there are funds set aside already. They're called the General Plan Maintenance Fund. There we take a fraction of every building permit that's issued for this purpose, but there will not be enough to complete the work. So this is an allocation of $100,000 for a set aside fund already. Please don't be shocked when we come back to you next year for additional fund. Hopefully there will be enough fund generated this year through building permit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that general plan maintenance fee is an established fee in the city's master fee schedule.
That's correct.
It's not just an internal allocation set aside. It's an established fee that's a part of the development fees.
And if I wanted to find those dollars in our budget, those would be in the fund balance, the general fund balance?
We should be able to provide that number. I don't know where that is, but we should be able to find that number for you. In the restricted revenue fund.
Yeah, it's not in the general fund revenue. It's a separate fund revenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can follow up tonight and provide counsel. What I think it's in two places. One, special revenue within the budget, but then it's also a called out in the CAFR as well. So we can provide it.
Okay. Yeah, and the reason I ask that is I'm trying to keep a mental tally because we have balances in different places, and I'm trying to keep track of, as we approve one, we decrement it from somewhere, and I just want to make sure I understand where we're pulling money from when we make these decisions. I appreciate that info.
So, Councilmember Salazar, if I could say something regarding the fund balance we show in the previous adopted budget summary, we only highlighted the major governmental funds and enterprise funds. So therefore, like general plan maintenance fees, those are special revenue funds. They're very small, so they're not in the highlight. If you are in it, and certainly we are certainly happy to pull additional information after this meeting.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. So they're not in any of the funds that we've discussed or looked at. So, and that's fine. I just wanted to understand if they were a subset of something else. So I appreciate that information. And then next question I flagged on 19. We're for the associate civil engineer. We're offsetting that with capital project dollars. And one question I had on that is, when we use capital funds to offset these positions, are we offsetting the fully burdened cost of that engineer, or is it salary only that gets offset by the capital project?
If I can expand on that, so typically when an engineer work on a project, this engineer bills to the CIP project, which is outside the general fund. So that's when you fully burden is basically all the salary and benefits. We will bill to that project. And then we do charge overhead to the CIP project. That's a year-end entry. Finance that books for the overhead is calculated at a certain rate to cover the general administration. That's what finance can provide to the council, and then directly, if there's anything you need to add, feel free to do so.
So I would just thank you, Director Sun. I would just like to add that that the overhead that is generated as part of the engineer charging on the project is what helps fund the administrative efforts, say on the fiscal side, for things as well. So as an engineer charges, it actually helps with other areas.
Okay. And again, repeating my last question, so if I were to look for where those capital project dollars are. I assume those are in the enterprise funds, possibly in general fund for non-enterprise CIP projects.
And they will. That is everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, we have several CIP funds, and then for instance, the facility CIP fund, the street CIP funds. That's for the citywide CIP, but enterprise funds like water, wastewater is in the enterprise funds. So, for instance, for a engineer working on a water wastewater project, they'll charge to the CIP project in the enterprises, the entire in the enterprise fund. But if they work on a facility like a RAC project, or not necessarily RAC, but something similar to a facility project or street improvement project, they will be charged to that specific capital improvement fund.
Thank you, Director Sun. I would also like to add, it gets a little more nuanced than that, so bear with me. So if you think about the street funds, most of the street stuff come from sales tax or gas tax, and sometimes those funds are actually leveraging as local match to other grant funds that we get, whether from the state or from the federal government. So the associate engineers that are working on CIP from a streets perspective will be charging to those funds. Those funds, as we know, are those transportation funds are restricted specifically to those projects or to transportation-related items. The enterprise funds, as Director Sun has indicated, are for water and wastewater are used specifically for those projects, and I believe as part of our rate study, that's how we came up with kind of the rate, is to ensure that we get a certain level of capital improvement to go so we can keep repairing our infrastructure. The facility funds themselves, the ones that I guess seem more general fund of general funds that come from internal service funds, those are currently not actually being worked on by an associate civil engineer. They're being handled by our facilities manager, and they're the ones that where we're doing the roof repairs or replacing the HVAC unit, and those don't have what I would classify as a capital, like a true capital, full-on capital effort, right? And those are just to replace things that are failing because we don't have those dedicated sources. Now, Director Sun indicated the RAC. That's slightly different because that's kind of a true CIP project, and those funds are coming from a variety of sources, namely from the San Bruno Community Foundations. Those would be ones where, say if we had an engineer that would be working on it, that's where they would be charging. That's how we pay for the design costs through Griffin and G4 and the project management costs. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you both. That was informative. And actually, Director Lee, you touched on something that kind of segues into my next question, which was when we're talking about using the funds, using capital funds that are in an enterprise, specifically water and sewer, it'll definitely have an impact that I don't think was factored in when we set the rates the last time. I think we're coming up on when we might want to review those fees, and I think we're at the end of our 5-year approval for increases. And so, given all those things, the potential impact on how those fees might have to be adjusted, and factoring also in the fact that the drought and the water conservation efforts will also impact the revenue for those funds. I'm a little concerned about being able to completely offset this, and so I just wanted to raise that as a concern. And I'm wondering if it would be appropriate for us to defer making decisions that do have impact on those funds until we've set fees and would have a chance to factor in, these changes, these proposed changes into a new fee structure. So just a thought. Don't need a response on that. Let's see, and my last question was just down in stormwater. I was wondering, I know that enterprise is hurting for money, and I was wondering why we sorry about that. Why we're putting the sidewalk pressure washing in that fund rather than streets.
Can you repeat that, Councilmember Salazar? I just didn't hear the full question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My dog is going crazy. I have the window open. Why we would put the cost for pressure washing in stormwater rather than putting it in streets?
Through the chair, thank you, Councilmember Salazar. That is a good question. So I believe the thought process at the time when this was started, street sweeping, is something that is part of the stormwater fund, and because this I believe at the time was thought of as an enhancement to the street sweeping, it was put in part of the stormwater funds. Yeah. I'll defer to
Director Lee. Let me take that. Typical budgeting for cities, streets funds is typically street repair. Street sweeping, sidewalk power washing are typically stormwater because both of those activities stop foreign infiltration into the stormwater system. And so it is common budgeting, and I would almost say industry standard budgeting, to fund street sweeping and sidewalk pressure washing from stormwater funds, and that has been the historical practice in San Bruno for I think as long as we've been doing street sweeping.
Okay, all right, that's a good answer. And then finally, I know I said that was my last one. That was my last specific one, but in general, I wanted to know. I heard a lot of items that are being requested as enhancements that are really just cost adjustments to ongoing contracts and services. Why weren't those included in the baseline budget with other increases? I'm surprised to see those come up separately as in individual requests.
Right. So that was not necessarily new this year. That has happened in prior years. The reason why they were called out is because in totality they were very, very significant impact in the funds. It is a significant increase due to just general cost increases, as well as, I really want to credit the department, both the new director and the new building and facilities manager, for going through a detailed analysis on what's needed to run those programs effectively. And so it was really a combination of significant increases in just CIP costs or inflationary adjustments, as well as the departmental staff going through and determining that there really needs to be some budget adds.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for your answers, and to my colleagues for indulging me.
Thank you, Councilmember. Now we will go to Vice Mayor Mason, please.
Thank you. I think this was actually asked earlier, and forgive me if I missed it, but how much of the funds that we just approved last night are already expended within these enhancements?
So zero right now, right? Because none of these are budgeted. With regard, the only new funds that were approved last night was the $900,000 from Artichoke Joe's. All of the net impact to the general fund was anticipated to come from fund balance. The one alternative that we did provide was funding the economic development manager position from the Artichoke Joe's. That's the only one.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that was the only one. Okay, and then so what is going on with our rolling wood emergency?
I believe you're talking about Streetlight.
Yep.
Sure. So I'll have Director Lee talk about that. But as a reminder, the City Council did approve a design project for that project, and Director Lee, talk about that, and if that project has been at all impacted by engineering staff departures, feel free to opine.
Yes, through the chair. So, like City Manager Grogan stated, there was an approved design effort for the Rolling Wood repairs. And so we put an RFP out, I believe, in early spring. We received those proposals back, and we're currently in the process of selecting the proposer to work with us on the design. The design effort itself is going to focus on two parts. One is, as council requested, an initial evaluation to see if there's any other types of new technology or efficient way to replace these Siri RO circuit lights, and then to move forward with design. We're running that effort in parallel because we've spoken to PG&E and identified certain streetlights that could potentially be solar powered. We're in the process of ordering these lights to test them to make sure that they can actually work in our environment. And so that testing will have to be run in parallel as we do the analysis, because we want to make sure before we buy, let's say, 300 lights, that they actually work, right? We don't install them that they don't work. So that's running in parallel with us selecting the consultant. Similar to that time, like City Manager Grogan stated, we've lost a lot of engineering staff. And so we needed to bring project managers on board to help us work with the consultant team. And I think, I forgot the time frame, but like about a month or 2 months ago, we approved an on-call PM contract. So we selected the on-call PM, and they're going to help us with the selection process of the design team for us to kind of get started with design. And so I believe, if I were to put an estimate on the time frame that has shifted due to staff vacancies, I would say probably a couple of months or a quarter, because we're trying to onboard a PM staff member to help us with this. PM consultant to help us with this project.
Yeah. How much is budgeted though currently for what you're describing? Because it sounds like that's the design, like the design phase.
Currently, council approved $500,000.
And Councilwoman Mason, or Vice Mayor Mason, your question was about the Rolling Wood streetlight outage. I just want to clarify that the $500,000 is design funds to replace our entire RO circuit network, which is more than the Rolling Wood neighborhood. And so the total construction cost for the replacement of the RO circuit network is a TBD. And as Director Lee mentioned, one, we need to complete the design, but we also need to determine are there viable locations where solar lights will work, and that will actually significantly reduce the cost of the streetlight replacements. But we know when we estimated the cost, it's several $1 million. Candidly, I think the funds to do that project are likely going to be developer community benefit funds that are anticipated in this budget year, but not yet received. Director Lee did mention the staff vacancies, but I'll just put it a little bit more bluntly. With the staff vacancies, work on that project came to a halt for a while. I would not say that it is completely paused, but we are working to onboard a contract engineer so that they can take over that project. But the staff leading that project left the city.
Yeah, so I'm less concerned on the staffing, because I think we're supporting on the staffing and the budget, Director Lee, and I know you're going to get staff as soon as you can. So I trust you on that. I think where I am concerned is that we have not adequately budgeted for the need that will come after the design phase. And I hear you on the development fees, but that's only if we receive the fees. And I don't like having to tell somebody that your lights are only going to work if we get development fees, because we didn't plan for that in advance, right, as part of our budget season. So, I mentioned it during our regular budget meeting, but I just think we should set a little bit more aside for the actual implementation of whatever the design recommendation is. I mean, that is a need in the community. It's not so much a want. It's really a need. So I'll leave that thought. But I do think that I don't feel like we've sufficiently planned for something that we've already been informed is an emergency situation. I wanted to ask also a little bit about the purchasing. So the purchasing officer, I just want to comment, I think it's needed. I'm glad to see that in the budget. As far as the building, the inspections, the over-the-counter, the review of the plans, I am a little hesitant on this one. I think a couple months ago I had requested a review and we received council support. So I guess the council supported a review of the existing contractor and just kind of the process. I guess my concerns are that I have received complaints from business owners, from residents, and I don't feel like in the staff report we've been provided an adequate alternative. So understanding that there's a need for inspections, the original staff report had mentioned that there were a number of companies that were procured, and I guess I'm hesitant to approve so much money to a contractor that we haven't had the report back from, but also that that necessarily haven't heard positive, I guess, responses. And so I don't know how to address that.
Sure. Vice Mayor Mason, let me break that down, because I think there are many different layers there, and we're talking about different services provided by various contractors. So if we back up to go forward a little bit, you did and council did support having a presentation by WC3, which is the contractor we're talking about, that was mentioned at that meeting, on the services that they provide for building inspection. And what was noted was complaints that were received or heard or from members for business owners, and I think members of the community. That presentation is actually scheduled for your very next regular city council meeting on July 26th. That contractor, as well as other contractors, support the city to provide not just building inspection services, building permit review services, planning review services. There absolutely was an RFP where various vendors are under contract with the city to provide a wide range of development-related services, because the level of development that we're experiencing is far beyond our staffing capacity, even if we did not have vacant positions. The contractor in question, WC3, is currently providing building inspection service, YouTube project at 1400 and 1450 Bay Hill, as well as the Hvac project, our project. The services that consultant are providing right now are satisfactory. They're satisfactory both to the project owner, YouTube, and the city. They are also to shift that contract, while it is possible to say, you know what, we're stopping mid-project and switching building inspectors. That will certainly incur delay in cost of project owners, both the city and YouTube. And right now, we have not received one complaint of the services that they are providing for that contract. And so in order to not impact undue cost on those projects, staff is recommending to continue the services of WC3 for both YouTube and the Hvac for building inspection. Totally understand that yourself and council voted to have a presentation from WC3 based on concerns or complaints that you have received for services that they may or may not have provided to businesses. Because it's hard to talk about the specific complaints without having each individual one and being able to assess what actually happened. But I think that certainly concerns have been raised, but they are not at all related to the work that is being done by the enhancement request and the work that's ongoing.
Right, and I don't, and maybe it's just me, but I do have a problem approving one in I would say a very different situation where you're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar project that will continue to provide funds to a contractor versus a mom-and-pop business that is struggling every month and that needs to open their business and can't because of the same exact contractor. So I think that the incentive is a little bit different, and I think that we should be treating them honestly the same because the service should be the same and the service level should be the same. And I'm not saying that it is or it's not. I'm just saying that from what I have heard, both from residents and from business owners, they're not as satisfactory as we're hearing from YouTube and from the city. And so I want to be cautious and respectful, but this is not a new conversation. You and I have had this conversation, and there are other contracts that are with the same contractor that are significantly higher than what we're now being asked to approve. And so I think my next question is going to be to Tricia, which is around this the enhancements. At some point when there is a vote, is there a possibility of separating out items if necessary for separate votes?
Yes, as a Brown Act matter, the enhancements can be considered individually. You can amend the motion to adopt the enhancements in any way you see appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
If I can, through the mayor, I think it's important that we segment what we're discussing. So the enhancement request is for the budgeting the funds to be expended. The next item on the city council's agenda is actually the authority to enter into contract with a certain vendor for those services. And so what I would say to the city council, whether you like vendor A, B, or C, the question you're being asked in this item is, do you want to budget receipt and expenditure of those funds so that the inspection services for the RAC and the YouTube project can continue?
Yeah.
The next item is with regard to the contractor.
Yeah, so I should have started that, but I think the other concern around just the expenditure of the funds for me is that there doesn't seem to be at our level a plan for this particular department, and it's concerning to me that so much of the work within the department is being outsourced, and I think that I understand that across the board there are constraints around staffing. Where I've been very supportive of the HR director even before it was proposed. But I also want to be realistic that this is not new to this particular department. And so long term, I've said this before as well, so I say that I'm just repeating this because I don't want the public to think this is coming out of thin air. But I'd like to see some kind of structure for the department where we are keeping these union jobs in-house. And I don't know that I'm seeing that based on the amount of money that is being expended on these contracts.
And Councilwoman Mason, I totally understand those concerns. Just to provide you with a bit of a response to that, when there was a shift in the department director position and a recruitment, there was a organizational study done for the department that did discuss staffing. One of the things that we discussed with council both then and at other times is that we are at a point now where the level of development that we're experiencing is at almost an all-time high, but certainly more than our staffing ability or the positions we have allocated. And cities oftentimes have a hybrid staffing model where when you're at a peak development, you contract out the work so that when development slows down, you're not, you don't have positions that are ongoing, that you do not have the development work to continue with the funding of those. So I think it's a larger conversation about how department is staffed, but I know that there was analysis done on that and discussions around the hybrid model that we're currently under.
Yeah, I'll just leave my thoughts there. I also just wanted to ask around the plans. There's a couple of requests for enhancements around plans. I just wanted to make sure that when those come up, that we'll be getting an update on what has been accomplished with the existing plans. So, like, one of them was the general plan. There was, I think, a water plan. But will we be receiving, as we have in the past, an update at the actual time that a contractor is selected to make these updates, with an update on what has been accomplished with the existing one?
Through the mayor and city manager, if I can answer that question. So the general plan update is really at the infancy stage. When it's ready for council's review, we will certainly host a study session. As I mentioned earlier, it's going to be a multi-year effort, at least 2 to 3 years. Safety element, however, needs to probably start earlier. So we will, when we have a clear scope from the 21 elements group, and we will definitely come back to council, ask for that contract to be authorized if it's at the council authority level, and we'll provide an update once we retained a consultant and if we have an overall schedule of when that will be completed.
Okay, thank you. My third question is just around the going back to the funds that were approved last night. So there's a number of kind of projects that have started but haven't been fulfilled, some this year, some 2 years ago, some longer. But I'm just curious to know if we can start attacking some of these projects kind of one by one instead of piecemeal, now that we have a funding source. So, for example, AJ's, the funds from last night are already funding a detective and have for quite some time. Hopefully we'll get the economic and development manager, but is there anything stopping us from saying we want to invest the difference in completing Posey Park, right, which isn't going to be enough because it's $2 million. But I guess what I'm getting at is strategically starting to fulfill promises that the council is making to the public, so that we see them come to fruition, instead of allocating different amounts in segments. Then it kind of makes the project last longer and potentially not get completed. So if the council spoke as a group, is there anything stopping us from saying we want to prioritize a project, have all the funds or the difference or whatever it is that the council agrees to go to that project, and just try to actually complete things one at a time?
Vice Mayor Mason, I think in response to that, let me respond in two fashions. One, I think prioritizing a project is a larger discussion, because in order to have that discussion, you need to prioritize it over other projects, and I'm not sure that that's a discussion we can have tonight. But the other response is, at our sort of most recent prior and pending staff departures, the allocation of funds to projects won't get the projects done. We have a resource capacity in both having the staff to administer, oversee the projects, and we are at a point now where we can fund new capital projects, and we can even provide the fund to bring on a contractor, but we do not, the workload is so high that we do not have the staff to man the contractor. And so I think that allocation of additional funds for additional capital improvement projects should be a larger conversation that we have when we are in receipt of the YouTube community benefit funds and begin to allocate and make some decisions, and hopefully by that time we will have a more clear picture on our resources and ability to execute. But I think what I'll tell you is the candid answer is, I think with just the funded projects that the City Council has already authorized in the budget that you adopted, we far strip the staffing resources that we have to execute on them.
Right, but these would not be new initiatives, and I think that the council understands the staffing constraints We're in negotiations. We've already supported a number of initiatives around increases for some of the bargaining groups. We're likely to support the majority of the asks that are being made now. So I think I'm trying to address these in different facets, right? So I think council is very supportive of the need for staffing, and I think we've all shown that over the last couple of years. But I want to go back to the funds from AJ's. So what I'm concerned about is that we're going to get a proposal and to say this is how we would suggest to spend the money. And I guess what I'm suggesting is we already have a list of initiatives. We already have all these priorities. Some of them are smaller, some of them are larger. But is there anything stopping from the council, since this money has not been allotted at all, from saying we as a council want to prioritize this, we want to close this out, and this is something that we can now fund?
So the simple answer to that is no. There is the city council can certainly allocate additional funds to projects. I was only saying that due to resource constraints, even though Posey Park is a funded project in part for design, I'm not sure that we're actually going to have capacity to work on that project. So we can add more money to that project, but it actually may not get the project completed simply because of our resource constraints right now. And that project requires engineering support. And we have 2 of 7 staff level engineers positions filled. And I know that we're working on that. But I think our ability to execute on these projects are extremely limited right now. So absolutely more funds can be allocated, but I just wanted to be clear and transparent that the additional allocation of funds may not make the execution go faster.
Okay, thank you. And then just thanking all of the directors for your thoughtfulness and what you propose for your departments and what you prepared for us today. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Medina, please.
Yes, and thank you for those questions, Vice Mayor Mason, because it kind of ties into my interest. It was for the Centennial Plaza, the Downtown Improvement Ad Hoc Committee, with Tom Hamilton and I mentioned last night, we met with staff and the landscape architect, and hearing that we had a potential source of funding, and hearing the city manager's response right now, the priority setting isn't tonight, but at some point we need to do that. I think we need to do that for a number of reasons. Not only because we have hit a staffing capacity issue to be able to, or the limits that our staffing recently have, that we don't have priorities, at least not as well defined in my mind, because we have strategic initiatives and we haven't honed down far enough to set priorities. And I'm also have heard that the amount of work is in the staff report, in the little notes. It's too much, and the word, I think it's burnout, and it's affecting morale because there's so much to do. So without priorities, maybe on another night, and when that occurs, I mean, we'll have to work with our city manager on that, to have a realistic set of priorities, especially now with this additional stress with our workforce capacity of not having people to do the work. And I know that we approved the budget for $3 million of consultants to do this oversight. Well, it's probably going to be more that we need to allocate, because we still don't have staff, and it takes quite a while of time to get staff. But anyhow, I just wanted to acknowledge what you were saying and what our city manager is saying, and we need to take a really hard look at what can realistically get done, because we I think we can't do what we're doing now, what we want to do now, which was what we already budgeted. I appreciate all the other questions. A clarification on the questions. I think partially what Councilman Salazar said is making sure that when we have a new position and it's being funded by X% of water, X% with wastewater, and so forth, that when the work is actually being done by that engineer or analyst, that those employees are charging against the work and projects that they're doing, that there is a balancing out. And I want to make sure that I heard that properly, that there will be that. So that's the question that I have now, Mr. Mayor.
So I'll take that, then I'll turn it over to Director Lee. But absolutely, we have a time accounting system where people charge their time to various projects, and San Bruno, like other cities, does a budgetary allocation of where various employees spend their time. It's based off an analysis and it's based off history, and then on each timesheet, staff allocates their time to projects and various cost centers. And that's how we use that data to analyze and to make the budget allocations for future years. But Director Lee, if I left anything out, please opine.
Thank you, City Manager Grogan. You did a very good explanation. I just want to dive into maybe a little more detail. So just to be clear, I know there's a lot of different positions and various funding sources. In public works, that's always kind of the challenge. We have various dedicated funding sources that could be spent for one thing and not for something else. And so I think just to dive a little deeper into what City Manager Grogan has stated is that for anything that's capital project related, we will charge that capital project. And the one thing that we highlighted earlier was the overhead charge. That overhead charge actually funds other positions that are doing administrative work for us as part of the projects. And so the more projects we actually work on, the more overhead funds we actually get for the administrative stuff. It's really counterintuitive in that sense, but I think it just takes a while to kind of, as you look through it, to understand that nuance. But I just want to make sure that it's clear. There was a mention of the positions that are coming from certain enterprise funds. And I think if the reference is to the business analyst position, that business analyst position is not actually working on projects. They're working on our entire system, right, network system, to ensure that we can have an infrastructure in place, a digital infrastructure in place, first to enhance and be more efficient in the type of work that we're doing. I know I didn't explain in that much detail, but literally what we're trying to do is to pull all the technologies we have together to make sure that they're all talking and working with each other. And that's something that, as I came here in the department, I realized that we don't currently have yet. Someone that looks at process flow and business flows to find efficiency so we can make them work with all the systems that we have or any new systems that we're trying to bring on board to automate to make our department a little more efficient.
Thank you. The other question I had is looking at the Measure G funding and our balance there. It seems like we have balanced targets for various other funds, and I was interested in hearing what balance should be there, being that if we can go to the slide, there's approximately, is it 700 or 800,000 left in Measure G funding, and just kind of hear from staff of what would be an appropriate balance there to kind of have set aside. And we're at it? Is it 700? Is it 800? Or what would that amount be? That's a pretty hefty hunk of change there.
Councilmember Medina, I think the best response that I can give to that is It all depends on how you use the Measure G fund. Typically, the funds that we have a reserve balance on are funds that we have reserves for operating expenditures, so they're set as a percentage of operating expenditures, or there are reserve funds that are set as because they are a reserve for infrastructure replacement. So you set them based on an analysis of what what infrastructure you're going to replace. Measure G is a distinctly different fund. It is a general purpose fund that can be allocated for any general purpose need. The amount of money that is desired to be left in that fund is not really, I think what you articulated as sort of a reserve policy target. It all depends on how you're utilizing the fund. Staff did articulate that we do believe that having a significant pot of money in the fund or amount of money in the fund is desirable because there are significant road projects that will be budgeted from that fund, and we all know about the cost escalation on road projects. And while we do have other funds that we use to fund road projects, those other funds are significantly limited. So, for example, when you look at the $5.4 million in street rehabilitation, that is for grind overlay replacement, etc. But that budget was made probably 6 months ago when we were in the throes of the budget development process. What we also know now is with the loss of engineering staff, our ability to execute on these projects will actually be extended. And so those projects may not go to construction for 12 months from now. And so what is the cost escalation and the engineer's estimate going to be in 12 months? Is it possible that when we go out to bid for those projects that we envision to be done are going to cost $500,000 more? That's absolutely possible, right? And so there's not a magic number to have in the fund, but there is, I think, a significant rationale to have money in that fund based on what you're using it for. And so, and as we talked about when we budgeted these funds, the first part is creating the budget for the fund. These road projects still have to be designed, and the director can opine on the design process, but it is a 6+ month design process. And so I do think, and director, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're at least a year out before we could see road reconstruction with this money, but correct me if I'm wrong.
You are correct, City Manager Grogan. Once the funding is provided, there is a lead time for the design effort to actually be implemented. We're challenged now by the fact that because of staffing levels, we need to solicit that service, right? And an RFP process in itself takes time. Like Councilmember Grogan stated earlier this evening, we're even further challenged with not just the design for. City Manager Grogan, I apologize. We're not just challenged by the design efforts, but just the staffing levels that we have to just have someone manage the project. And so we now have to take that additional step to bring on a project manager so we can bring on a consultant to help us with the design. And so, we're trying to work through that process, as we're trying to hire. We've had multiple recruitments out at the moment. And so we're trying to kind of address this on all ends.
No, thank you for that additional detail, and this is where I think if we had a priority, and we could talk about that more later, it seems like we need to get some of these streets done sooner than later, right? But we all know that, right? And so it's my understanding that we typically have our streets designed by a consultant anyway. That's my understanding, that that's typically not a function that is handled internally. So I think those are comments for now. We're already at 7 o'clock, and let's see how we can keep this going. Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? I'm going to open it to the public. I'm going to go ahead and open to the public for any comments, questions or statements from members of the public, please? This will be the time regarding the enhancements.
No hands are raised.
Thank you very much. So we'll bring it back to council. We've had that. I think Councilmember Medina kind of had asked, can we take these in some parts? We've kind of done that before, not line item by line item, but maybe we can, council's indulgence, I'd kind of like to start backward. Sometimes, or hold on, I apologize. There is, or we could put up the slide. Thank you. Here, I'm trying to go through the pad. So, here are one-time, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mayor. If we go backward, we can begin with the IS funds. If we begin with the general funds, I just want to note that because there are two alternatives for the city manager's office, those are not within the groupings, and so I just I don't want us to begin on slide 20 without first going to slides 14 and 15, because there's an impact. There's a difference on depending on the option that the city council takes, if it's a net impact or not a net impact.
Thank you. And I also noticed, I believe you, city manager, or maybe the finance director, already made the modification from the 10,000 to 100,000.
I'm not sure if that's been made in the slide, but
I already corrected in the slide. The stormwater.
Thank you. I noticed that. Thank you very much for doing that so that the numbers are correct. So, so for us, you know, you have the one-time enhancements or the enhancements in the enterprise funds. I know sometimes those go fairly quickly. So I was wondering if that's okay with council if we take the enterprise fund requests, if that's okay. We can see the stormwater, the 52, the 10,000 to 100,000 has been modified.
Still waiting for the screen sharing to show up on mine.
Oh, okay.
I don't know about anybody else.
I can see the slide.
Okay, I can't, but I see that it's working, or trying to, as it's doing its little thing.
Oh, I got you.
You might want to turn off your camera for a second, Marty.
All right.
So if there's questions or comments on this aspect of it, Councilmember Salazar.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to bring up my previous comment again about potentially waiting until fees are set for these enterprise funds before allocating these changes. I mean, looking at these, I know some of these are probably more critical than others, especially when it comes to, you know, water quality testing, and perhaps some of these might be we might want to separate those out. But I'm thinking that in general, especially related to adding an analyst position, that I would be a lot more comfortable if I understood the whole health of the enterprise and how our future fee structure is going to support it.
Okay, Councilmember, so it's the analyst position specifically?
Specifically that one, I would say probably including overtime, because that's also it's a significant item. And I mean, there are several, I mean, other, you know, not small items that are included in here. So I would say that where we're impacting those funds, and we have basically limited capacity to take on things without impacting future projects, which is what we committed to the community that we would do with the rate increases, that I'd like to understand that and really understand the whole health of the enterprise before making the changes.
Other questions or comments from colleagues?
Through the mayor, would we, I know that we've seen those as part of the main budgeting process, we've seen the projections for each of the enterprises. Are those slides we can? Is that what you're looking for, Councilman Salazar? To
Right. Yeah. So we have money in the funds, but those funds technically, or in my recollection, are funds that we have been amassing to do repairs, massive repairs on water mains and sewers, and those are the funds that we've been using to implement those projects. When we went to ratepayers to ask them for the rate increases, we said this is what we're going to be addressing. And so, granted, some of these things are, changes in just the cost of doing business. I really want to make sure that we're doing a holistic approach to how we're handling this, both in how we're going to generate the revenue going forward before we make a commitment to spend the money.
Right. My understanding is that that it was also for ongoing operations, not just for big projects. And yes, the need for these large projects was absolutely used to help sell those rate increases, but it's all coming out of the enterprise, including all the items that are needed for ongoing operations, and that's what these enhancements appear to me to need to address. I know the city manager has his hand up, so maybe we should let him go.
Mr. Salazar, did you have anything to add before we go to the city manager?
No, we can go to the city manager. Thank you.
Okay, city manager, please.
Sure. Staff, can you or city manager's office staff, can we bring up the enterprise, both the water and sewer enterprise slide that talked about the fund balance that was showed? Because it's not in this presentation. It's in our prior budget presentation. I want to say it was. Okay. Well, this shows it. So it's important to note that both what Council Member Salazar and Council Member Hamilton said are true. And so both the water and water and wastewater enterprise have operating expenditure, revenue, and as we see in water, there is a what's called a surplus of 4.7 and then $6 million for wastewater. Those are funds that are being set aside for future capital projects. And so any additional ongoing costs will certainly decrease that. And Councilmember Salazar is correct. We do have council authorized water and sewer rate studies that are ongoing. The work on those will not be completed until the end of the calendar year, and so it may be into January before we are actually discussing those. And so staff does believe that there are sufficient funds in the enterprises to handle the additional ongoing costs. Whether any of those ongoing costs relate in any moderate increase in rates is not known at this time. However, what I would say, based on the order of magnitude of the capital improvement project needs, I think it's the capital improvement project needs that would drive the more significant rate increase, not the overall moderate increase in operating expenditures. But certainly it would impact those surplus numbers that are shown there.
Okay, yeah, understood. And then given the timeline for that study, if it's not going to be ready till the end of the year, then I will withdraw my request to consider that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions, comments in regards to the enterprise at this time? Okay, I'm hearing and seeing none, and I can't see all, so just speak out. If not, so it sounds like the council would be okay at this point with the enterprise fund enhancement requests.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Medina. Oh, yes, okay. Got it.
I'm
all right.
Also yes.
Okay. I'm a yes.
Yes.
Yes. And yes. Okay, so we have that. When that comes up, that should be okay.
Ta-da!
If I can suggest, I think we need to talk about the assistant city manager.
Yeah, well, that's going to come up with the other enhancements. Because we're going to take those all enhancements because they're on a couple slides, but the city manager wanted us to remind us that it's not captured in that one slide, so we need to caveat with it. Yes. So if we can go.
Do we want to do internal service funds?
Oh, thank you. Excellent idea. Appreciate it, city manager. Internal service fund enhancement requests. Are there any? This is on slide 29. Is there any questions on those items? I just had one, and that was on the fleet study. I know it's a one-time cost, $60,000. If that is approved and initiated, and I'm assuming that's outside work to do that, okay, then it comes back home, and we have this. What's the next step in that, or is it something that we have the bandwidth in which, when it comes back, to do something with it?
Yeah. So, Mayor, let me take that one. So a fleet study is actually a really important organizational checkup study, and it impacts your how you operate. And so the study will take a look at our fleet, both vehicles and heavy equipment, and look at our replacement schedule. Right? Are we replacing our vehicles at the right time frame? Can we use some vehicles longer? Things have been mentioned. For example, we know we have to replace PD vehicles when they are not even over oftentimes 100,000 miles, but can those vehicles actually be repurposed for other portions of our fleet, like a pool vehicle that is not utilized as heavy and it's not emergency response, and it will also have an impact on the size of our fleet. We know that during COVID we had a need for more vehicles. And there were some vehicle replacements that were put off. There were other vehicles that were retained in the fleet. So it will analyze the size of our fleet. It will also analyze how we handle, for example, our pool vehicles. And when we pay mileage reimbursement, oftentimes what cities see is that sometimes it's actually cheaper to pay your employees the mileage reimbursement than have a pool vehicle due to the number of miles you put on that pool vehicle, right? If you have a pool vehicle sitting like a year and you only put 1,000 miles on it, you have to be a lot cheaper to pay a mileage reimbursement. And so I do think the recommendations of that study will not be those type of recommendations where, it costs money to implement. It may actually save money to implement some of the recommendations, and it may create both operational efficiencies as well as inform how much money we set aside and true up how we set aside money to replace our fleet.
Thank you. Councilmember Hamilton.
When was just a quick question, when was the fleet study last done? I'm assuming this is something that's done periodically.
I do not know that we've done a fleet study in the last 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a compelling answer.
Any other questions or comments from colleagues in regards to the Internal Service Fund enhancement requests? Hearing none, I am fine with those. How are the rest of my colleagues?
Hi, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I'm good.
Okay. Vice Mayor Mason?
Are we voting for it as a whole, or are we voting by individual department asks?
No, right now I'm just trying to see if all five of us are saying we're fine. I'm just going to go to the next section, and we're going to hone in on when we have some disparities, like Councilmember Salazar said, hey, I'd like to see these two removed. But if there's nothing, then we're going to go to the next item. But we haven't taken an official vote yet. I'm just asking if there's any concerns or comments, so this will be the time to address those.
Yeah, no, just for me, just the building, but it's not on this one, so we can go on.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'm seeing that everyone okay there. How about fund enhancements? Would that be one we could?
Mr. Mayor, that would be the next category. So if we go back up, I think we can either begin general fund at council's desire with the CMO position changes, or we could begin with the one-time enhancements, but the ongoing and the net neutral will be impacted by the city manager's office one. Because
correct. I was just trying to divide them up on the slide. So, are you saying not to do the one time, but to go up to the?
My recommendation. Yeah, my recommendation. We begin with slide 14 and 15, and then go to the summary tables that begin on slide 20.
Okay. So, okay. So I have something, but I'm sorry. Colleagues, is there anything in regards to, and I guess we're talking about just this one slide, or are we talking about all of the total enhancements?
So I think 14 and 15 are alternatives on each other. It is adding the HR director, retaining the assistant city manager, and the difference between the initial recommendation and the alternative is that the alternative has not freezing the economic development manager position, but funding that, and a recommended or suggested funding source is the Artichoke Chills funds that were approved last night.
Okay, Councilmember Medina?
Yes, I'm in favor of the slide 15 alternative. We've heard for years of the need to have a economic development program and manager, and fortunately we have the funding to be able to do it, and I think that's my choice. Thank you.
Councilmember Hamilton?
I am also in favor of the slide 15 alternative. I think it's critical that we restore the HR director position and retain the ACM position. I spoke last time regarding the importance of the economic development manager position and my desire to keep it open. The sad reality is, we've had so much trouble staffing or hiring for this that it may remain open if we can't find a candidate. But I would hate for a qualified candidate to emerge and us not be in a position to staff it. So I'm in favor of the slide 15 alternative.
Councilmember Salazar?
And I'm going to cast my lot for the cost-neutral original version because I'm a little concerned that we're already talking about spending money that we haven't seen a penny of, and I felt just like the Vice Mayor mentioned, that we have some critical infrastructure needs that need to be addressed, and before we start allocating new cost, taking these new revenues and allocating them here, I want to make sure that we do it within that context of looking at all of our needs and making sure that we're prioritizing the ones that have the most impact. And I think looking at those streetlights and knowing that they could go out at any time, I agree that those need to be that project needs to be prioritized. And if there's new revenue coming in, I'd like us to look at it in that context.
Okay, thank you. Going to myself, I was looking not to have an HR director. The reason for that, similar, is to me that's about, what is that, $47,852 if I'm right, I believe. The difference between to add the HR director, am I correct on that figure? To restore it, I'm sure it's not an ad.
Right. To restore the HR director and freeze the economic development manager position is $90,000.
Okay. The rationale for what I'm trying to do is get to 118,285. This is something similar. I feel that it is critical. When we say restore, when the assistant city manager departed, the former, not this one, prior, two ago, then they became an HR director because there was no assistant city manager. when the council decided to have an assistant city manager, then there became the HR manager. And that was the rationale. That's how that happened. One of the reasons I had done that back then was because I was trying to find and fund how do we get another officer on the streets. And so that's why that's my suggestion. Again, I had it at 48,000, but city manager telling me then it's a 90,000. So, yeah. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, can I respond to that? So from the seat of the city manager's office and also from the seat of someone who was a consultant and did cycle time and HR studies, I totally understand the history of San Bruno, which is when you have limited funds, you oftentimes make tough decisions. And you're absolutely right. I did hear the history that when we eliminated our HR director position, it was to fund another police officer because we need more police officers. And now I think we're engaged, more than 10 years later, in a discussion of potentially not restoring the HR director position so we can add another police officer. And I totally understand the need for both. What I would say is when we articulated in the memo, the level of staffing that San Bruno dedicates to its HR department is by far lower than most other cities in county. And the corporate infrastructure that's needed to manage this operation in this city with 262 employees, I think dictates a executive level HR manager. That's my professional opinion. I think when we look at the cities that have HR directors, Belmont, Burlingame, Daly City, Redwood City, San Mateo, South San Francisco, Foster City, and Millbrae. And all of those cities, their ratio to HR staffing is, not including the director position, is greater than San Bruno. And so the police department absolutely is an absolutely critical department. And I know on some level, I do not want to say one is more important, but I will say supporting the corporate personnel resource that is your HR department and an HR director is critically important for the effective operation and administration of San Bruno, which is a $261 million corporation.
Councilmember Hamilton.
I would agree that a city of our size and complexity and number of employees needs to have an HR director. I understand why we combine those positions, and that made perfect sense. The other reason that I think it's so important is also looking at the many responsibilities that the assistant city manager position is going to need to fulfill. We see them summarized here, but this is an enormous amount of work already, and to keep the positions combined means that this person would also be doing everything the HR director would be doing as well, which is already a full-time job. And I think I don't think we have the luxury at this point of combining those positions. I understand the desire to do so from a fiscal perspective, but I don't think that's the right decision for us at this time.
Councilmember Medina. You're on mute.
Forgot that button up on top. I would suggest, Mr. Mayor, that we also could look at the funds that we got approved last night for that police officer. I know we haven't heard from Vice Mayor Mason, but I think we could do both. We should be doing both because our needs are so great. And I'll wait for that. But I wanted to offer that as an alternative. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It could really be both. And I didn't mention this earlier, and Councilman Salazar did make a great point of that the fund balance was already that we were drawing down on that pretty decent clip. However, it's also my understanding that our fund balance is at a higher level than it has been in a number of years. And so as we're moving forward, I think we need to have these critical positions, and adding that police officer with this assistant city manager is, I think we can do both with the HR director. So thank you.
Vice Mayor Mason.
Yeah, I would just hesitate to start assigning funds from the AJs to just salaries, because then that's going to take away what I think the intention of it was, at least when I initially brought up the idea. But I think for me, I am torn because I think I really understand Councilmember Salazar's comments, but this is kind of a tough decision because it's so much money. But this is what I will say just from the time that I've been on the council. We have Javon. That's it. We have had a number of directors leave, and every time a director has left, it's Javon taking his position plus any other position, and I should say the city manager, Grogan. And I think that as we build a stronger organization, we really have to think about succession planning, and we have to think about sustainability at every level. And I personally would love to see an assistant city manager that's on the ground, because I think we need more on the operation side. And in our discussions, it sounds like this assistant city manager will be doing a lot of the groundwork. And I think the HR director, since I got here, I've been shocked that a city this size doesn't have an HR director. So, and honestly, the assistant city manager that I've seen has largely been doing HR director work. So, I can't not support the positions, knowing that we have to build up an organization that is sustainable. And I think it's a lot for the city manager to consistently covering not only his role, but also the roles of anybody who tends to be out. And we have to start really thinking about what is sustainable, what is succession planning. And I'm not saying that, that Director Grogan's going anywhere. I just think that we have to really start thinking long-term for our agency and our city. So I would support them. And then, of course, I support the Economic Development Manager position. As you all know, it's no secret, I'd love to see the AJ's money going to downtown. And this is really the position that could be the catalyst for that, and that could recommend ways to use some of the funds that we receive for AJ's in downtown. So it's a hard pill to swallow because it's so much money, but I do think that we really need to start thinking long-term about what we want the city's sustainability and stability to look like. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Appreciate everyone's comment. I'm hopeful too, when and if we approve all the contracts, that they're 4 years. So a HR person, manager or director or ACM, would hopefully be able to not have a lot of time, because we know that it's takes a lot of time and effort and communication. So that's where I'm at. I'm not. I appreciate everybody's comment, but I do understand, and I believe that police officer, and again, it's unfreezing a position, which has been frozen for some time. We've had 2. I think we still even have a CSO. So that's just my particular belief, but the majority of the council has spoken. To what I'm hearing is slide 15. Is that fair? Did I misrepresent anybody? Thank you, Tom. I'm sorry, council member.
The chief has
I'm asking a question, and I'll go to the chief. So I just want to finish this. I want to make sure that I've heard everybody correct.
Slide 15, please. Thank you.
Than't you, sir.
And I was no on 15.
No. And Councilmember Mason, you were good with 15, correct? Thank you. That's kind of what I want to just kind of get us going toward that. Chief Johansson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, I thought it would be appropriate for me to kind of chime in here as you're struggling with some difficult financial decisions. And of course, I'd like to see all of the police positions restored, and I appreciate the efforts to do so. With that being said, I think it is important to understand that the lack of HR director and an assistant city manager is creating significant impacts for other department heads as well as for staff across the entire enterprise. And I do think that continuing to operate without those positions is, like I say, having a pretty significant impact on all of us. It's important to understand that while City Manager Grogan picks up a lot of that slack, it also results in department heads taking on a lot of responsibilities that would normally be handled by the HR director and or the assistant city manager. And so in the grand scheme of things, as you're struggling to make that decision, just, again, I really appreciate the support, and I'm hopeful that we can get all of those positions as part of this adopted budget. But I do think I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that it's entirely possible that those positions hold greater importance for the overall health of the city than the remaining police officer position.
Chief, before you depart, do we have a frozen CSO position?
Yeah, we still have a frozen dispatcher and 2 frozen CSO positions as part of that frozen position.
So we would still have 2 CSO, 1 dispatch, and 1 officer if with that. And I don't expect you to maybe know this, but on a CSO basis, what is the average, or what is the figure annually?
I'm sorry, I actually don't have that readily available, but I could certainly get it.
No, maybe the finance director may know.
Mayor, it would take me some time to calculate on the CSO and dispatcher.
I was just curious about the CSO. Do we believe it's under $50,000? Is that a safe bet?
Well, no. Every position we fund is over $100,000. just about a CSO when you wrap in fully loaded benefits is around 100 and maybe a little bit more.
Because I know we've had part-time or full-time, and I'm going to assume the two CSOs are maybe full-time positions, I'm assuming. I don't know.
We're sharing.
One full-time CSO, a full-time clerk. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my board while I'm answering this question.
Thank you.
A dispatcher and the 2 officers.
So 2 officers, 1 dispatcher, and 1 CSO, or 2 CSOs?
1 full-time CSO, 1 part-time CSO, and a police.
Okay. Well, thank you for indulging my questions. The reason I bring it up is I'm wondering also on maybe the part-time, and I understand city manager, even that could be, over 50 or something. But what I'm wondering is, with the Artichoke Joe's agreement, obviously we've solidified police officer, which has already been ongoing. There is the additional cost. My question is as has been practiced by Artichoke Joe's, they've written a check for $50,000 each year. So is that still occurring with this agreement?
I think the $50,000 was the additional regular tax, right?
Yeah.
Manager?
Yeah. I think we're straying into.
It's either a yes or no, but I believe it's a yes. And the reason I'm bringing this up is what my thought was is you take those monies and you earmark them toward maybe a part-time CSO to try to have that cost if it's not being utilized for something. That's where I'm going with this. So, but with that said, people can look into that. But I'll stop at that point. I think we can move on from this slide, City Manager, to the next one.
Let's go to slide 20.
Thank you.
Director. Okay, so
thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if you will, these are the one-time general fund enhancement slides. It is slide 20. Can we go to slide 21 just to make sure?
Thank you.
The City Council sees all of them. And so 20 and 21 represent the one-time general fund enhancements.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments, thoughts, etc. from colleagues? Vice Mayor, and then Councilmember Salazar.
Yeah, I would just like to ask that we separate the building from the rest. Please, thank you.
And hopefully the staff is noting some of these areas so we can get through this other aspect. Councilmember Salazar.
A question on the traffic study and the timing with all of the current development that's happening right now and anticipated in the next year. Would that be something that might be held off until some of those projects are completed, and then we can actually measure the impact of those projects?
Yeah. Councilmember Salazar, good question. Director Lee, I'm trying to think back. I know we had this discussion. Can you opine on that? And I know Deputy Director Ritchie was part of that conversation too. But take it away.
Thank you, City Manager Grogan. So the traffic study, citywide traffic study may not be descriptive enough of for the item. It's actually a speed survey that's being studied. And so it's not really tied to any development. It's just to ensure that the speed study is in place so that it's speeding and enforcement is legally enforceable. And so there, as I recall correctly, I have years wrong, there's a certain period of time where the speed study is valid for. It can be extended for an additional period. But then after that, that speed study needs to be redone. And so my recollection is that we passed that period of time, we've extended it and had it extended once, and now we're going back to a period when we have to redo the speed study. In addition to that, there are additional streets that are not prima facie 25 miles an hour that were requested to be included as part of the speed study. And so that's what's kind of driving it, the expiration of the speed study and the additional streets.
All right. Thank you for that clarification.
Councilmember Medina.
I'm fine with these enhancements. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hamilton.
I just wanted to comment when we were talking about the speed study. My recollection from my time on TSBC is that once the speed study gets far enough out of compliance, we're no longer able to cite for speeding, or at a minimum, folks can fight their speeding tickets and win, because they will go 50 miles an hour down a 25-mile-an-hour street, and but there's no evidence that it's not safe to go 50 miles an hour because our speed study is out of range.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this, the one-time general fund enhancements? Okay. City Manager, I think we've gone through all the slides, or through the items. Is that fair?
Well,
go ahead.
So the general fund enhancement. Is there? I think we would have a vote. Excuse me, on it. The council is supportive of the general fund one-time enhancements, and then there's a category after this as well.
Through the mayor, I think the vice mayor's
yes
desire is that we take building as a separate.
Yes. That's what I'm trying to. What I'm trying to get to is that what I'd like to do is, city manager, staff, the items that we were all good on, right? That you heard all five of us saying we're fine or we're okay. I think there were two items. One that the vice mayor just brought up on building, and there was slide 14, 15 that I heard any discrepancies, meaning it was not all in concurrence. Is that how you took it as well?
No, sorry, Mayor. I thought that we were going to start with 14, 15. We've decided on 15, and then we were going to go through the general fund enhancement categories. The first category is what's shown in 20 and 21. That's the one time. And then there's the ongoing general fund enhancements, which includes the purchasing officer and the fire captain And I thought we were going to have the discussion on that category, and then the very last category is the neutral.
Okay.
Okay. So I think where we are, Mayor, is there's been a request from Vice Mayor Mason that when the City Council votes on the one-time general fund enhancements, that you, I think, take a vote first, not including the building enhancements. Right. And that's both the contract, the in-house plan examiner, and the building inspector. And Vice Mayor Mason, I heard you ask your primary questions about the building inspector, but I think you have concerns about both, correct? Or is it just the building inspector?
No, you're correct.
So both.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to differentiate, is take everything as a group that we're all good on. And then once we get to, like you just said, then let's take that out and have a separate vote. And when we had the slide 14, 15, you have a majority of the same slide 15. I want to have that as a separate vote because not all of us are in concurrence. That makes sense. I'm looking like I need to be clear.
If I can, just to clarify, since I'm the one who's requesting it, I would just say to go in order, so maybe we can just go around the table on building, and then since nobody seems to have a problem with anything else, then everything else within general fund enhancements.
Everything in general fund enhancements, or everything in one-time general fund enhancements?
One-time general fund enhancements, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Salazar. Oh, you mute.
Oh, there it goes. I was going to ask for that same clarification on one-time versus the ongoing.
Okay. So let's maybe we'll take a couple votes. We're going to get through this on the one-time enhancements minus building. Accurate? Does that seem fair? Okay. So let's go a motion in a second, and I'll please, and whoever wishes.
Through the mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve all of the listed one-time general fund enhancements with the exception of those classified as building.
Second.
Motion seconded. Hamilton, Marty Medina. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason?
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Now we'll take building on separately, both items, as it's a consultant for in-house planning examiner services and contract on-demand senior building inspector. Any action by council?
Make a motion to approve the building portions of the budget for the one-time general fund enhancements.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Motion seconded. Marty Medina, Salazar. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason?
No.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Aye. Motion passes 4-1. Now we'll move up to the next one, please.
And that is slide 22.
Thank you. This is, oh, there you go. This is ongoing general fund enhancements. And that's slide 20. Any action from council? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Salazar.
I just wanted to say that for me, this was this portion was really the reason I asked to have a separate conversation around this, because these are long-term commitments, and it's a significant amount of money that we're talking about. But you know, I've been thinking a lot about these positions, and we've heard staff you know, make their pitch, and I'd be very hard pressed to say no to these positions, even though they are significant. I don't see how we can move forward without them. So with that, I will make the motion to approve the ongoing cost enhancements for this budget.
I'll second that.
Motion Salazar, seconded Marty Medina. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason?
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, and now I think we're on slide 23.
Thank you. Slide 23 is ongoing general enhancement impact neutral. It is up on the screen. Again, it's slide 23. Councilmember Hamilton.
So similar comments to what Councilmember Salazar said about the last section. You know, this is a significant amount of money, but you know, given our current state of staffing within our engineering core and these are all needed moves to get us back to where we need to be for engineering. So I am supportive of this and would like to make a motion that we approve the ongoing general fund enhancements listed as impact neutral.
I'll second that.
Motion Hamilton, seconded Marty Medina. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason?
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. City Manager.
I think that takes us through all of our enhancement request items, and we are ready to close out this item.
Mr. Mayor.
The Mayor, did we do an actual roll call vote for the general fund enhancement request regarding the CMO and all that? I think we just kind of went around the room and said we had.
Yes, that was slide 14, 15. Yes, I was just going to bring up. You're correct. I memorized that. That's what I brought up. So let's bring that slide up, please, and just have an action by council.
Since I brought it up, I'll make a motion that we approve the under general fund enhancement requests, we approve the alternative CMO position adjustments enhancements request as listed.
I'll second that.
Motion Hamilton, seconded Marty Medina. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
No.
Vice Mayor Mason?
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina?
No. Okay, motion passes 3-2, and I think City Manager, you are correct. This has concluded, and we can close this item out. Unless there's anything else, I'm just concurrent.
Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I just want to ask, because earlier when we look at the enterprise funds and the internal service fund enhancement, also no council member voiced any different opinion. I don't recall we heard any vote for those either.
Please.
Okay. I think Director Sun is right. We did not have a roll call vote on the enterprise and internal service fund enhancements. We started to do roll call when we got to general fund, and I think it's a good comment to close them all out so we have a roll call vote for everything.
Absolutely.
We can go back.
Thank you very much, Finance Director. Thank you, City Manager.
Through the Mayor.
Yes, please.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the enterprise funds enhancements requests as listed.
Second.
Motion Hamilton, seconded Marty Medina. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason?
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Now I'm going to Finance Director and to our City Manager. I am going to say that we can now officially.
Nope. One more.
No, not yet. We've got Councilmember Medina. We got to keep going. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you brought up adding another police officer, and I'm in support of that. I'd like to hear staff's a little bit of input from staff, and we'll see where we can go with this discussion if how we feel about it. Adding another police officer.
Sure. In response to Councilmember Medina, staff is of course supportive of restoring the frozen, the additional frozen police officer position. If you're asking where council would fund that from, you can fund it from the general fund balance. You can fund it from the additional artificial kills funds that are not appropriated, or you can fund it from Measure G. I think those are your available ongoing funding sources to utilize, all of which come from the general fund. Right, so it would be a general fund funded position, and we would allocate it from fund balance or one of the other two sources. But I do want to go back and we can have that discussion, but we did a roll call vote on all the internal service funds, and so we should close that out as well. And then any other discussions that council would like to have, absolutely.
That's the last one here. I'd like to make a motion to approve the internal service funds enhancement request.
I'll second.
Motion seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason?
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Now we're back. Councilmember Medina, you'd asked the question. Appreciate that. And City Manager's response on that particular question was Artichoke Joe's Fund, which has not been allocated. I guess now it has been allocated. Measure G, and there was one other item, but it would come from general funds.
Yeah, general fund balance. And there's sufficient general fund balance for the estimated 118,000.
Councilmember Hamilton.
I just want to voice my support. I do think that we should unfreeze the second police officer position. As far as funding it from general fund balance versus AJ's money versus Measure G, I would rather fund it from either from fund balance or from Measure G. I don't really have a preference for one versus the other of those, but those would be my preferences. But I'll support whatever has the majority, regardless of funding source. That would get the second position unfunded or funded.
Ruben, you've heard at least from three, myself, two Medinas and Mr. Hamilton at this moment, that we want to look to an opportunity to unfreeze the police position. Is it something best discussed tonight, or is it something best brought back at the next meeting with rather than just, putting it right before us tonight, or what do you prefer?
I think it's totally possible for council to take that action tonight. We know the cost because there was an enhancement request to unfreeze one. It's a vacant position, or both are vacant, right? Because they're frozen. So unfreezing the other would be the same cost, and it is certainly valid. We're talking about enhancement request, and that's an enhancement to the budget. So if so desired, council can direct the unfreezing of that position and articulate the funding source. And what I would say, there was a resolution attached to this item, but what we would do is, because we've had a roll call vote for everything, we would amend that resolution as appropriate.
Right. So can I go around the room, and if you're in favor, where you think the funding source would be, so we can kind of narrow this down if that's possible. Mr. Medina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there an actual AJ fund, or does it actually just go to the general fund? So it's basically coming out of the general fund balance. We don't have it.
General
right?
fund.
Right. So it's a general fund. Okay. So general fund, sir.
General Fund. Thank you, Mr. Medina. Mr. Hamilton?
General fund balance.
Thank you. Mr. Salazar, do you have any comments?
My comment is that I don't think it's appropriate for us to be making budget adjustments from the dais at the last minute after we approve the budget. And again, we have a lot of needs that need to be prioritized, and I think we should do it within the context of that conversation and not single out a single position that we happen to have an interest in and advocate that way. I mean, it needs to be part of a bigger conversation. There's a lot of needs. I understand the need for a police officer, but we have other needs as well.
Thank you very much. And that's why I was posing the question to the manager whether it was better to have that conversation or go forward, but at least we have some direction. Vice Mayor Mason?
Yeah, I concur with Councilmember Salazar. We also just invested quite a bit of money in an impact justice review where the recommendation for the police department was an analyst. And we also have a number of other departments who have needs, and I think we should listen to what was recommended tonight by the staff because we have a lot of expenses in front of us, especially with the negotiations we're in right now. Thank you.
Thank you. And for me, I would say general fund, and then analyst, but that's adding a position, and to me, we're trying to, shall we say, we're trying to unfreeze. We're just trying to get back to where we were in that area. So that's why I'm okay to have the conversation later. But I'm also okay to make a motion that we unfreeze the second police officer position.
I'll second that.
Motion and seconded. Medina. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Before I vote, and this is also does your motion also include to fund it from the general fund?
Yes, I thought I said general fund. If I didn't, that's what I said.
For clarifying. Aye.
Thank you.
Can you repeat the motion on the table? I'm sorry.
The motion is to fund the second chosen police officer position utilizing general funds.
And we just asked the city manager if that's okay to introduce a new position without the public having reviewed that request prior to the vote. The city attorney, I'm sorry, not the city manager, the city attorney.
It was on the question. I think the city attorney stated because it's enhancements and the manager said we'd have to modify the resolution, but because we're talking about enhancements, we could. Am I correct, city attorney?
Mr. Mayor, I agree with the way you stated the ability to add an enhancement, yes.
I think it's also important to note this is not a new position. This is a frozen position that's been
correct.
Untapped.
Okay, so we're in the for the roll call vote. Continue, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
No.
Vice Mayor Mason?
No.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Aye. Motion passes 3-2. I want to just pause to ask my colleagues: do we need to be able to stretch and relax? And I did, yes. We do need to take 5 minutes. I just was realizing I was told yes. A 5-minute break. We still have 2 items left on the agenda: item B and C, and then we will continue. Is that okay, everyone? Don't log off, please. 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Can I ask some questions before we close this out?
Okay.
Vice Mayor, if I could make one statement, my computer is threatening to reboot in
that is why.
47 seconds, and so if I drop off, it's not. Just understand that the computer is going to do its thing, and then I'll be back as soon as I can.
Or we can come back in 5 minutes and go back to what we were saying, just so we can get the council member back. Vice Mayor, is that okay?
Yeah, it's up to Councilmember Salazar. I don't mind either way.
Yeah. No. I don't want you to lose your train of thought, though. Don't let me interrupt you. I could always watch the recording later, but I just wanted to just let everyone know I didn't disappear.
Vice Mayor.
Yeah. So I wanted to better understand what just happened. So I think so does this mean that we Well, I guess let me first ask, how long has this position been frozen?
I don't know if the chief is available. May know that since he has history, or the city manager. Chief, or whoever.
Chief Johansson, please respond.
This was part of the positions that were frozen at the onset of COVID to allow for budgetary shortfalls. It's been frozen ever since.
Okay, so just about 2 years?
Yeah, I think that was somewhere in early 2020.
Okay. And so I just want to go back to the city attorney. So I guess I didn't realize enhancements is just broad. So does that mean this is like a blank check to open up any conversation we'd like about any position that's been frozen in San Bruno?
Well, so Mayor Medina and Councilmember Mason, the Brown Act just requires that the agenda state briefly what will be considered, and the agenda said you're going to be considering enhancements. So you're not tied to just the enhancements or in the staff report. You are able to consider budget enhancements.
But it has to be substantially reasonable that any reasonable person would be able to assess and make a comment if they needed to based on this topic, correct?
That's right. But it's just like approving the budget. The budget is a very broad discussion, and similarly, budget enhancements are very broad.
Okay. I think it's, I mean, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I think given the amount of conversation that occurred in South San Francisco around the hiring of police, I would actually argue that it is quite substantive. It actually resulted in a council member being elected. So I respect the police, but I do have an issue with the way that this was addressed tonight. And the fact that we didn't give any other director an opportunity to provide us any additional enhancements that they may have wanted, or any additional needs. It's a lot of money, and it's going to be an ongoing cost. So thank you so much. But I don't think it was substantially shared, and I think that there is an issue with the transparency of how this occurred tonight. Thank you.
And the department head, the chief, did not ask. So I would say that started with myself bringing up the statement because of what we were talking about, slide 14, 15. So I don't want it, and the chief was even one who said, you know, it's okay, have that go. So I just want to make it clear that the chief was not afforded that opportunities where other department heads were not. So I just kind of want to have that noted.
Right, but we weren't afforded the opportunity to know that was coming up to maybe advocate for other directors or other departments that may have also needed it, or the police, which once again, the recommendation we received yesterday was for an analyst. But I would say, given the conversations that have been had around hiring, specifically around law enforcement, I would argue that it is quite material, and you may have had different people turn out based on what that decision was that we just made. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will go ahead and pause for 5, and I'm sure by then Mr. Salazar shall return.
How long were you watching that timer ticking down on you? Michael?
I got the 15-minute mark, right? I was like, okay, let's get through this vote. And it kept going. I was like, oh, no.
I've gotten them on my work computer with 5. It's like, oh, by the way, you got 5 minutes. I'm like,
Okay, let's go ahead and reconvene the San Bruno City Council meeting of July the 13th. And we are concluded with item A. We will now move on, still under conduct of business, to item B, please.
Item 4B, adopt resolution authorizing the city manager to authorize an agreement with West Coast Code Consultants for building inspection services in the amount of $250,000.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and members of the Council. My name is Radha Mehta, and I'm the CED Management Analyst. Today we are presenting an item and asking Council to adopt resolution authorizing the City Manager to execute an agreement with West Coast Code Consultants for building inspection services in the amount of $250,000.
Thank you very much. Any questions from colleagues? I'm sorry.
I think there should be a presentation.
Oh, I apologize.
Sorry, I must not have shared it.
No, I thought you were efficient. I go, okay.
Sorry about that.
It's coming up.
All right. Staff is presenting an item and asking Council to, I already went over that. So in January 25th, 2022, City Council authorized $250,000 agreement with West Coast Code Consultants, or WC3, for on-call building inspection and permit processing services with WC3 due to increased inspection activities for large projects and staff changes. Staff is requesting a new agreement with WC3 for the continuation of YouTube, Hvac, and other large development inspections with the same consultant along with the code compliance services. With a primarily junior building inspection staff, there is a need for an inspector specialized in large and complex developments that can also mentor junior inspectors. In the fiscal year budget enhancement, CED requested $250,000 for the building inspection services to increase from 3 days a week to 4 days a week. The building permit revenue will offset the agreement budget, and additional fees will also be collected for re-inspection services and also for cost recoverable code compliance services. Staff have projected an increase in inspection services based on fiscal year 22 inspection report and building permit activity for large projects. The senior building inspection services will bring an estimate of a fourth of the building permit revenue. So we have projected that the building inspector will be bringing in from all the large developments around $500,000. Additionally, the senior building inspection can also provide stop work notice and code compliance assistance, which is also cost recoverable. Staff recommends the Council to adopt this resolution for continuation of work with WC3. And at this time, we would like to welcome any questions and discussion. Sorry, I believe you're on mute.
Yeah. Thank you very much. You're gave a good presentation. You're keeping me on point. Yes, City Manager.
May I ask the Director Wu to articulate any additional services that WC3 will be providing outside of the YouTube project and inspections on the Hvac in detail?
Of course. Through the Mayor, City Manager Gorgren brought up a good point. So, and I'd like to kind of even take a step back further, so building division actually has multiple consultants helping the department right now. One of them is WC3, one of them is CSG that does offsite plan check services review, and also the other one right now is True North. We've also relied on another consultant by the name of Leap. So we do have a variety of different consultants that's assisting the division right now. In terms of WC3, they were providing technician, front counter technician services to us. If council remembers, I actually had 2 open positions that were not filled, that were the phase to the department. So they would take in applications and taking building permits. Because we had a staffing turnover, we were relying on WC3 to provide that services. And also, if council remember, there was a period of time that I did not have a building official. So WC3 provided a staff augmentation to have an acting building official during that time. In addition to that, WC3 also provides off-site plan check review, and these are all of the building permits that were submitted to the city. They don't plan check them in City Hall, and they get shipped to an off-site location for an off-site plan checker to do the services, and that's what we call off-site plan check services. Each one of them is a different contract. What's in front of you is specifically only for the building inspection services, totaling up to $250,000 to provide YouTube, Hvac, and as City Manager Grogan mentioned, towards the earlier part of this year, I've actually lost my building inspectors. So this building inspector, through the last fiscal year, were fulfilling the majority of the building inspection services, not only for YouTube, Hvac, all of the building inspection services for the city. So this would include tenant improvement in downtown, housing addition somewhere in the city. He has the capability of doing an array of different inspection, and so we have put him to task. In addition, he was also doing code enforcement related matters to the code enforcement officer, Robert Harrison, to deal with unhabitable housing situation or illegal code enforcement issue. So this building inspector has provided a variety of different services, but it's under the umbrella of building inspection services for this contract.
Thank you very much. Questions from colleagues? And Vice Mayor, I saw your hand up. There you go. Vice Mayor Mason.
Yeah, so what would be the total amount with this $250,000 that has been contracted with this company?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, I guess let me make it a little more direct. So this would make the total amount that San Bruno is going to pay West Coast Cafe, West Coast Code Consultants $1.5 million. Is that right? Between this contract, the January contract, and the $1 million contract?
So that would be $250,000 per fiscal year. If you're looking at the calendar year, it's still $250,000 for building inspection services. And this is a maximum amount, and we only pay for the services that are rendered. If there are not enough services rendered under this contract, we will just pay them on the hourly that they billed the city for the services that they provided.
Right. So the question though is, what's the total amount of money that we're paying this contractor? Not in this agreement, in total with all the agreements we have with this contractor.
Rada, do you have a rough estimate for all of the other POs and contracts that we have put together towards WC3?
It's roughly it's under 1.5. We have the $1 million agreement for off-site plan review services. We also have that same agreement with another firm as well, but that's just a master agreement. We haven't exhausted the funds yet, and it's based off of the services that are rendered.
So I would just incorporate my earlier comments into this conversation, just around wanting to see a broader plan for our department, in-house hiring, and what the current process is with this particular company, knowing that we've had a number of complaints that have come at least to my attention. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Medina.
Yes, thank you for the report. I'm just interested interested in a couple things. There's a sentence here on basically saying, however, the revenue for the stop work or violation investigation was not collected. This is page 11 of the packet, first page of the report. Just kind of wanted to have a better understanding of what happened there.
Of course, through the mayor. So Councilmember Medina, if you remember, the department came to council during the master fee schedule update, requesting additional fees to be implemented for the department. Code enforcement violations and related activity were the new fees that we proposed. So prior to July 1st of this year, anyone that was doing code enforcement related activities were not cost recoverable. So they will be coming out of general fund. So starting from July 1st, if anyone was doing any code enforcement related activities or notice of violation, we now, according to the new master fee schedule, can collect money from the vendors. So that's what that sentence meant.
Okay, so any fees that were collected or charged back in the day, it kind of had an issue with it, that it wasn't really approved until July.
Right. So in other words, before July 1st of this year, they were covered by general fund.
Interesting. And going back to the presentation, so to make sure I understand this, we are spending $250,000 on this contract, and the projected revenue is $503,880. So it's a positive return. I'm going to make sure that was correct. Right?
That is correct.
Okay. Excellent. But I also want to, acknowledge and find out. I know it's this part of the work would include residential inspections, and do we have how difficult would it be to allow a customer that pulled the building permit to kind of give feedback on the services provided? I heard of a couple that I've been contacted on regarding inspections, and just like it seems like I understand where we're at right now of needing experienced, flexible inspectors because we don't have any, and our skill set, if we were to bring somebody on right now, they're not going to be coming in brand new and then going and inspecting something at YouTube. That's a whole broad range compared to maybe something as simple as some framing or so forth. But just wanted to express some interest in getting feedback and being able to improve customer service. The issue that I had was that the checklist for compliance was kind of rambling, that it would just grow. And so the inspector would come in one time and say, hey, those two things over there are not cool, so you need to fix those. And then upon the return, it would be like, and by the way, that vent on the other side of the house is in the wrong location. And the resident or the contractor's like, you didn't tell me when you came by, right? So just wanted to acknowledge that there will always be some complaints and inspections. As a former inspector, I get it that people just disagree, but how we resolve that and make sure that we're getting back to our residents and our business owners and our developers that those complaints are being acknowledged and there's a process to handle those.
Of course, through the mayor. Councilmember Medina, that's an excellent question. So if I recollect our conversation during the earlier part of the year, Vice Mayor Mason and also some of the council members have been asking about quality assurance, making sure that we're doing the right thing. It took a while, but we had just implemented the QR code to be placed on the back of any business card for a building inspector. So if anyone wants to fill out a very short 5-question survey to see how they did. But, between, I think it was March of this year and now, I've asked my staff, when you go out to, meet with others, whether it's a homeowner or YouTube or Google, whoever they are, ask them to tell me, the director, how they're doing. I am proud to say I've actually received several compliments of my 3 inspectors, 2 in-house and 1 consultant. So they vary from the YouTubes of the world or the residential or the mom and pop on San Mateo. I think one of them was the store owner who was trying to open up the hair salon. So she was having difficulty doing this on her own, doing a hair salon versus, I think it was a combination of a consignment shop. So she acknowledged that because she was doing this on her own, there was a lot of things that she did not know. And because this is her first time doing this kind of business, she did not know what she did not know. But she appreciated the consultant's help and then the patience that the staff provided to allow her to ask the questions and to be just welcoming of all the slew of questions. I actually got a very nice compliment letter from her at the end of the process. She said that she couldn't even get to where she is today if it wasn't for that building staff. So we don't normally come out and say how great we are, but every once in a while I get them and I say them back to my staff just to say, hey, you're doing a great job, but do we have more room for improvement? Of course. So we'll continue to do that building survey, and hopefully we'll get more data and more measurement to know where how we're doing.
Thank you very much.
City Manager, you have your hand up. You wanted to add?
I wanted to add, but if another council member has a question, I didn't want to go before other council questions. I just wanted to...
No other hands are up at this time.
Perfect. Let me just say that the issue with supporting individual businesses, I do believe will be greatly improved with the hiring of an economic development manager that can be an ombudsman to help our small and medium-sized businesses go through what can be an oftentimes complex and confusing process. With regard to WC3 as a contractor, let me just say in general that I too share concerns with over-reliance on one contractor, and we have issued a RFP and when we and are utilizing additional contractors and have additional contractors under contract. When we have the presentation with council, that again is currently scheduled for your next regular, June 26th. Actually, it's not the regular meeting. It's a 5 o'clock meeting prior to the regular meeting. July 26th, I'm sorry. We will not just talk about WC3, but we will provide the city council with an overview of the various contractors and services that support the Community and Economic Development Department. So, Vice Mayor, I think the concerns that you raised in the prior item with regard to just knowing the full complement of how the consultants support the both inspection work, plan review work, and off-site permitting work will reveal itself through that presentation.
Thank you, City Manager. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say thank you, and I'm glad to hear that the result of one of the business owners was well, but I was with a business owner when they were crying through the process and spending a significant amount of money and was involved and was in communication with city manager through the process to ensure that it started moving more smoothly. So I'm glad that it ended well, but the process was not as helpful as it was described, and I just want to make sure that at least the side that I heard was also articulated. So thank you.
Okay, see no other hands up. Let's see if there's any members of the public that have comments or questions.
There are no hands raised at the moment.
Thank you so very much. I'll bring it back to council for further conversation or action, and this is a resolution.
Through the chair.
Thank you.
I will make the motion to approve the resolution.
I'll second.
Motion seconded. Salazar Hamilton. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason,
No.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Aye. Motion passes 4-1. Now, final item on conduct of business is item C.
Item 4C, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract amendment with David J. Powers Associates, Inc. in the amount not to exceed $138,850 for services related to preparing necessary environmental review for the housing element update.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rada, I think you're on mute. So we'll go ahead and have Rada run through this presentation as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wu. So staff has also presented an item for council to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract agreement with David J. Powers and Associates in the amount not to exceed $138,850 for services related to preparing necessary environmental review for the housing element update. On February 24th, 2022, City executed an agreement with David J. Powers, or DJP, in the amount of $72,000 for Phase 1 of the housing element update. Staff is recommending an amendment to increase compensation by $66,850 for an aggregate contract amount of $138,850 for Phase 2 of the housing element update. This slide shows the breakdown of the agreement based on the 2 phases of the housing element project. Staff is requesting the agreement to be amended to increase compensation by $66,850. The budget is included in the budget enhancement just recently approved by City Council. Planning's budget enhancement request included consultant services for the housing element update for fiscal year 23. The services within the budget enhancement include CEQA and water study services. The state law does require environmental analysis and water study to be completed. Technical expertise and resources from David J. Powers is necessary to prepare the environmental documents. City's housing element update is required to be approved by City Council and certified by the California Department of Housing and Community by January 2023. This slide highlights the scope of work necessary to perform Phase 2 of the housing element update. Air quality and greenhouse gas emission analysis, noise assessment, utilities and services systems, preparation of draft mitigation, negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program, project management services. To date, the estimated cost to complete the housing element update is $330,498. The allocation of funding is shown in this table. Staff have been approved a rebrand and is awaiting an executed agreement. LEAP grant has been awarded, and the city was just reimbursed today, about $67,000, but we're still waiting for the remaining funds. City Council also appropriated $88,000 last fiscal year, and the budget has been exhausted through previous agreements. Staff have been approved just now $120,000 for fiscal year 23 for the housing element update. And so the $66,850,000 of this amendment would be coming out of that appropriation. Staff would like to recommend Council to adopt this resolution authorizing this agreement amendment. If there are any questions and discussions at this time, we welcome them.
Thank you very much for the presentation and information. Any questions from colleagues at this time? Seeing no hands, let's see if there's any member of the public that wish to ask questions or comment, please.
No hands are raised.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to council for any other discussion and or action. This is a resolution. Councilmember Hamilton.
So I was going to put my hand up, but then I ended up answering my own question by referring back to the staff report. And so my understanding from all this is that it was always intended that this was going to be done in 2 phases. So this is not an unexpected expense, and it's one that we just appropriated money for when we approved the budget. So I'm fine with it, and I'm happy to introduce a resolution, but I don't want to cut anybody off for further discussion.
I see no other hands. Last call. Back to Mr. Hamilton, who has gone ahead and made a motion to adopt the resolution.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to adopt the resolution.
I'll second.
Motion Hamilton, seconded Salazar. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason?
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. With that, concludes our agenda. Again, I think council wishes to thank all of the staff that's been here and for allowing us additional questions and comments in regards to the enhancements and the budget process. With that, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting to the next regular city council. The next regular city council meeting, which will be held on Tuesday, July 26, 2022 at 7 p.m. With that said, everyone, please enjoy the rest of the week. Be safe.